Chapter 610. Chu Tian clapped his hands. Meng Yingying came over holding a large pile of boxes. These boxes had the symbol of the spiritual helmet on them. It's better to see it with your own eyes than to talk about it. Chu Tian opened a box and took out a beautifully crafted helmet. This is the official version of the miracle helmet. Our miracle city has stockpiled several 100,000 of them, and we are prepared to auction them off to various parts of the continent after the summit. Everyone can try out its functions first. Miracle City had never released an official spiritual helmet before. The emperors participating in the summit today also used a simplified version, so they could only enter the main hall and couldn't go anywhere else. Alright, we'll all put on the helmet. Chu Tian first put on the helmet. Now I'll introduce you all to the functions of the miracle helmet. The Elven King put on the helmet and a weak spiritual fluctuation was sent to his brain, just like a tiny electric shock. The Elven King did not resist. This was the effect of the miracle helmet. His eyes blurred. Lancelot was surprised to find that there was a control panel in his field of vision. Of course, this wasn't real, it was just spiritual energy acting on his brain and creating a projection on his retina, therefore it was just an illusion. I think everyone can see it. Chu Tian sat on the side and explained, in front of you, there are several options. Other than the main option of entering the miracle continent, there is also the spiritual communication, the spiritual bank, and the spiritual shopping center. Currently there are 3 open support services. The miracle continent hasn't been open to the public yet, so there is no way to enter it right now. The main point is these 3 support services. Our cell phone number can be directly linked to the spiritual helmet and we can use the spiritual helmet to call the number, immediately opening the spiritual communication mode. Do you want to try it? Lancelot and Nidhogg both tried it. After the 2 of them used the spiritual helmet to communicate, a scene that made their expressions change appeared. When the communication was successfully connected, the image of the other side appeared in front of them. Of course, this image wasn't real, it was just a projection created by the spiritual helmet. Surprised? This is the advantage of the spiritual communication. Chu Tian said with a faint smile. The spiritual communication has 2 advantages compared to the magnetic sound communication. The first is that it ignores distance, so you don't need to worry about running to a place the communication field can't reach. The second point is to be able to produce a mental projection of the other party, thereby achieving face-to-face communication. Lancelot nodded. This is indeed a big improvement. You have to understand that our conventional communication methods have their advantages, but there is a big problem, and that is that we have to build communication stations all over the world. It is very inconvenient to manage, and it consumes a lot of manpower and resources. Moreover, the coverage area is very limited, and it is very troublesome to collect fees and make a profit. When Chu Tian said this, he gently tapped his helmet. The advantage of the spiritual communication is that we don't need to build base stations all over the world. With several hundred smart brains managing the spiritual communication terminals, Miracle City can establish a very good pricing model. Miracle City would use 2 communication methods to monopolize the entire continent's communication market. Mental communication was expensive, and it was mainly targeted at high-end people. The magnetic sound communication of ordinary mobile phones was very cheap and targeted at the middle and lower classes. Chu Tian could confidently say that as long as the spiritual helmet could be promoted in the mainland, the communication market alone would be able to make up for all the lost money from selling the helmet. Most importantly, the telecommunications market was a consumption-type market. It would become an endless source of income. The Dragon Lord couldn't help asking, how will Miracle City pay the fees? Good question. Chu Tian gently snapped his fingers. Do you see the personal bank option under the communication option? They all placed their attention on the spiritual bank. An account information box appeared in front of them. Lancelot and the others were surprised to find that it directly displayed the bank's information, including how many cards they had and how much they had. Chu Tian explained, our alliance's banks have already used the most advanced spiritual identification technology. Each person's spiritual energy is unique in this world, therefore it is very safe to use it as a personal bank key. I have already collected the bank information through the smart brain and stored it in the spiritual network world. Our goal is to let each person have their own spiritual account in the future. This discovery was truly shocking. They found that not only could they see the spiritual account, they could also use it to transfer money. The cost of the spiritual communication was also directly deducted from the account. The others also noticed that on the Phantom control panel, the last option was the spiritual shopping center. Opening the shopping center. As expected, it really was connected to the Miracle Shopping Center. Chu Tian explained to them, "This shopping center is our official shopping center, the online version of the Miracle Shopping Center. For all kinds of materials, there are over several hundred subdivisions, allowing customers to buy any product from the Miracle Shopping Center. In the future, there will be over 1 billion users." The small online spiritual shopping center combined with the spiritual payment system will become a cornucopia. Our entire Forest Alliance will benefit from this. Lancelot and the others couldn't help admiring Chu Tian for being a genius. He actually thought of opening the spiritual bank and the spiritual shopping center. If the people on the continent wanted to buy something, wouldn't they be able to put on a helmet and choose from over 1 million products? Each product could be viewed through a virtual image, and as long as they had money in their bank account, they could directly pay for it. The miracle commerce wouldn't just benefit from this. The 5 large banks of the Alliance would advance by leaps and bounds. The giants of the Forest Alliance had cooperated with the Miracle Shopping Center a long time ago, and there were quite a few entrepreneurs that had established quite a large business there. In the future, the Miracle Shopping Center would move to the Miracle Spiritual Helmet. Then the giants of the forest would have a head start advantage. Chu Tian promised on the spot that the Miracle Spiritual Helmet would be bound to the 6 large banks. They were the Elven Bank, Behemoth Bank, Giant Bank, Titan Bank, Deep Blue Bank, and the Central Bank, Miracle Bank. After the Miracle Spiritual Helmet was popularized, the 6 large banks would dominate the continent's economy. Just based on this point, the 5 giants wouldn't need to worry about being eliminated by the times. Who told them to hold the wallet of this era? These are just the subsidiary services of the Miracle Spiritual Helmet. Our Miracle Continent is the true leader. The Miracle Continent will create a spiritual network that connects the entire world. With this kind of large group social background, we can sell virtual cities and virtual products, provide virtual entertainment, and provide virtual services. Any one of these has limitless potential. Chu Tian took off the helmet. As members of the Alliance, you will naturally receive more help and support on the Miracle Continent in the future. Do you still think that making the helmet public and letting them earn money is a loss? Chapter 611. Now they completely understood Chu Tian's thoughts. The Miracle Spiritual Helmet itself was not important. Chu Tian just wanted to quickly occupy the market and make the Miracle Spiritual Helmet an indispensable part of people's lives. In the next 10 to 20 years, even if there was a power that could imitate the Miracle Helmets and produce their own brand of helmets, it would be hard to replace the Miracle Helmets that had already formed a certain scale in the market. Chu Tian had already explained everything. "I'll be leaving first." Lancelot called out to him, "Please wait, there's still something else." Chu Tian looked at him and asked in a curious voice, "What is it? Is there any confusion regarding the summit?" "The city lord has already explained it clearly. Of course it's not for this matter." Lancelot said with a faint smile, "It's the Night Elven King who asked me to send a message. He wants to see you alone." Night Elven King? The Night Elven King's identity was not normal. This fellow was the ruler of the Dark Night Forest, a fully deserving emperor-level character. Although among the elves, the Night Elven King Eunice and the Wood Elven King Lancelot were on the same level, in terms of power, the Night Elven King was several times stronger than the Wood Elven King. Whether it was in terms of individual strength or influence, the Night Elven King wanted to see Chu Tian. How could Chu Tian refuse to see him? Several elves dressed as night elves were sent to Moonshine Town. The elf in the lead looked to be around 30-40 years old, but the aura he gave off was very old, like an old man that had lived for 1,000 to 2,000 years. Actually, the Night Elven King Eunice's age wasn't that different from this. Lancelot personally came forward to greet him. Your Excellency Eunice, City Lord Chu Tian is inside, please. Eunice looked at Lancelot with a look of appreciation. The Wood Elves were the strongest elven race on the continent, but they had been declining for tens of thousands of years. Now they could only stay safe in the Forest of Chaos. But this generation's Wood Elven king was unprecedentedly outstanding. It wasn't simple for him to have such achievements at such a young age. The most important thing was, this young elven king seized this opportunity. In the future, the Wood Elves would be Miracle City's main partner in the Forest of Chaos. If they rose with Miracle City, perhaps they could return to their peak and even surpass history. Eunice came in front of Chu Tian. Greetings, City Lord. Your Majesty, the Elven King is this polite. This little one cannot accept it. Chu Tian's mouth said this, but he didn't look like he couldn't bear it. He was clearly very happy. Your Majesty has come to find this little one. I wonder what advice you have? City Lord is a genius. This one does not dare give any advice, but I have a request. Eunice had a sincere expression. The elves all had a kind of gentle temperament, which was probably related to the beliefs and habits of their race. This was also why Eunice clearly had the influence and strength to be an emperor, but he still considered himself a trivial king. The Dark Night Elves believe in the moon god, and it's said that Miracle City has already built ruins on the moon. According to the ancient records, the ruins on the moon were created by the moon god, and there is a moon god palace inside, waiting for the moon god's descendants to open it. Chu God was slightly stunned. Chu. Eunice took out a jade plate. The jade plate was engraved with a large number of profound runes. That's right, the token to open the moon god palace is actually a sacred tool passed down from generation to generation in our Dark Night Elven clan. Eunice. Tion Chu, to him Chu Tianchin. Chu, that's right. Eunice revealed a look of excitement. The moon god's temple is very important to my clan. I hope the city lord can help us. Chu Tian rubbed his chin in thought. Sending them to the moon wasn't hard at all. Chu Tian could casually open a transport array and go up in a few minutes. The problem now was that if the Dark Night Elves occupied the moon, wouldn't they be a hindrance to Miracle City's development? Other than that, Chu Tian was also very interested in the moon's ruins. He didn't plan on giving it to others to develop. Eunice saw Chu Tian's hesitation and immediately added, if the city lord agrees to this matter, the Dark Night Elves will forever support Miracle City and become Miracle City's firm allies. This was not a bad condition. Miracle City lacked peak-level allies on the continent. The Dark Night Forest's influence was enough to fight an empire. If they could obtain the support of the Dark Night Forest, Miracle City wouldn't have to be so careful in the future. Chu Tian said to Eunice, I can send you to the moon and I can give the moon god's temple to you, but I have a condition. During the exploration of the moon god's temple, I want to bring my people with you. Eunice understood what Chu Tian was thinking. This was nothing more than trying to gain some benefits from inside. But since Chu Tian agreed to give the moon god's temple to the Dark Night Elves, how could Eunice not be satisfied? As for the benefits inside, the Dark Night Forest was an empire-level power with tens of thousands of years of history, so they didn't place it in their eyes. Eunice was very happy. First I thank the city lord. Chu Tian nodded. Inying, bring the Dark Night Elven Majesty and use the transport tower to go to the moon's base. Have the Dark Night Elven friends search for the entrance to the moon god's temple. Eunice never thought that Chu Tian would be this straightforward, actually directly sending them up. He couldn't help feeling grateful to Chu Tian. Chu Tian secretly rolled his eyes. Father has searched for this long and still hasn't found a way to enter the center of the moon, otherwise who would need you? After sending off Eunice, Chu Tian returned to Miracle City. The several rulers had finished participating in the Miracle Summit and were now preparing to return to their territories. Chu Tian learned some details from Meng Qingwu. These empire-level powers were secretly trying to rope in the surrounding powers of Miracle City. There was no need to mention the Dark Night Forest. They had a close relationship with the Eternal Forest. The other powers were all colluding with each other. For example, the Dragon Territory and the Dragon's Ridge were very close. For example, the Wild Beast Empire and the Savage Highlands were very close. For example, the Netherworld Sea wanted to cooperate with the giant mountain range. For example, Chen Bingyu reported that the Wind Moon Empire was secretly looking for him. For example, the Heaven-Burning Empire specially went to West Sea City to ally with Bo Sha. These large characters took advantage of the fact that Chu Tian wasn't paying attention to spend a lot of money in the Forest of Chaos, wantonly buying cities that hadn't joined the Forest Alliance yet. This was because they knew that if they joined the Forest Alliance, the cities would be monitored by smart brains and they wouldn't be able to do anything. So, they thought of ways to pick cities that hadn't joined and then take these cities to join, increasing their position in the alliance. How could these painstaking actions be hidden from the young Miss eyes? But regarding these actions, Chu Tian turned a blind eye, too lazy to say anything. The 6 giants were all smart people, they knew their limits. As long as it didn't harm the alliance, it didn't matter if they took some benefits from each other. Chu Tian didn't care about these messy matters. This was because there was an important matter waiting for Chu Tian to complete, which was to prepare for his wedding with Meng Yingying. Chu Tian didn't feel assured finding anyone to do this matter, so he had to personally arrange it and let the young miss be his assistant. According to the agreement, this wedding would be held in West Sea City, but Chu Tian wanted to give Meng Yingying the most luxurious wedding in history. Of course he couldn't just do it half-heartedly. Chu Tian directly decided that the Miracle Continent's open beta would be held on the same day as Meng Yingying's wedding. Chu Tian didn't just want the Miracle Continent to commemorate this wedding, he also wanted all the large characters from the continent to come and give their blessings to Meng Yingying. Chu Tian said to Meng Qingwu, "How long do we need to prepare?" "According to your plan, it won't be enough without 3-4 months." "What? 3-4 months?" Chu Tian shook his head and said, "At most a month, no more. You don't want Meng Yingying to wait forever, right?" The young miss was helpless about this. "All right. Then 1 month it is." Chapter 612. Before Chu Tian finished his business, news came from the moon base. Eunice and the Dark Knight Elven Elders had found the moon god's palace, which made Chu Tian very surprised. But since they had found it, how could there be a reason to ignore it? Chu Tian directly brought the 4 giants of the Forest Alliance and City Lord Bo Sha, the 5 strongest Heaven Domain experts of the Alliance, to the moon base. Chu Tian had just arrived at the moon base when the little fox excitedly came over, climbing onto Chu Tian's shoulder in 2 or 3 steps. He hadn't brought the little fox with him these days, so the little fox spent most of its time on the moon base. On one hand, it could protect the moon base from being destroyed, while on the other hand, the little fox was swallowing the moon monsters, allowing its strength to increase by leaps and bounds. The little fox's body was a size bigger and its 5 tails had completely grown. Now even the 6th tail had begun to appear. This was enough to prove the little fox's progress on the moon. According to the report from the moon base, within several hundred kilometers of the base, there wasn't a single shadow of a moon monster to be found. This fellow really could eat. It was no wonder Chu Tian couldn't find a way to enter the moon god's palace. The moon god's palace was in the center of the moon's energy ocean, and because of the powerful seals and restrictions, as well as the 1,000-meter deep energy ocean, all of Chu Tian's probing methods were useless. Chu Tian looked over the energy ocean and tried to use his divine sense to explore, but as soon as his divine sense entered, it was immediately blocked by an even stronger resistance. The energy inside is too strong, it won't be easy for us to enter. Not to mention that there are seals and restrictions below. We need to think about how to open the moon god's palace. Eunice said, "City Lord doesn't need to worry, the Dark Knight Elves have already made preparations." Chu Tian was a bit stunned. "Oh? Is that so?" The 4 Dark Elf Elders stood at the 4 corners. Eunice took out the jade plate from his bosom and threw it out. This moon god's token spun and floated above the sea of energy. The 4 Dark Elves started chanting incantations one after another, releasing powerful energy from their bodies into the jade plate. A pillar of light fell onto the surface of the ocean. It was like a frozen river falling on the surface of the water. The entire surface of the sea was stirred up by the violent energy, and then at a speed visible to the naked eye, it continuously froze from the center to the surroundings. When it was completely frozen, Chu Tian was shocked. It had actually turned into a large chain of palaces. That's right, the originally liquid energy ocean, upon being bombarded by the power, violently surged, and then solidified in the air, turning into palaces. Each of the palaces looked crystal clear, like exquisite and beautiful jade carvings. Every detail was perfect. They did not look like they had been formed in an instant. Instead, they looked like they had been slowly carved out of a huge piece of jade over hundreds of years. There was not a single flaw or mistake. Chu Tian rubbed his chin. "This is getting interesting." Eunice said to Chu Tian, "Master of the city, let's go down." The group arrived at the central palace. The interior of the main palace was just as intricate. Every item was lifelike and presented in the form of jade carvings. Whether it was the furnishings or the decorations of the palace pillars, they were all integrated with the entire palace. There was an ancient aura everywhere. This palace was the moon god's palace. The Dark Night Elves could send their most outstanding people to the moon god's palace to cultivate and comprehend. This palace was filled with the moon god's aura, allowing them to cultivate twice as fast with half the effort. What Eunice really wanted was not as simple as a cultivation holy land. What he wanted was the moon god's ancient inheritance. In the moon god's palace's main altar, there was a passage to the moon's core. The place where the moon god fell was one of the most important treasures of this world. Chu Tian had long wanted to dig it out, but he didn't have a way. With the help of the Dark Night Elves Eunice and the others, this matter became much simpler. This is the moon god's ruins. Everyone followed the secret path of the sacrificial altar and arrived at the deeper region of the moon. As soon as they entered, everyone's body trembled. This was because this was an incomparably huge and spacious space. It was filled with unbelievable spiritual energy, and the ground was filled with precious crystals that had been condensed for hundreds of thousands of years. All kinds of precious herbs that grew in this environment were almost all immortal grade. This many immortal herbs. Most of them were level 4 immortal herbs. This was an unimaginable temptation to Heaven Domain experts. Whether it was the Elven King, the Dragon Lord, Thunder's Fury, Burst Claw, or Bo Sha, these Heaven Domain experts that weren't weak had never seen such an enticing scene before. If they brought back a few of the herbs here, they would be good things that Heaven Domain experts would fight over. These herbs grew in this kind of environment. They already had a divine nature. The Night Elves were also very excited and overjoyed. However, compared to the various immortal medicines in front of them, they were even more excited about the huge white pillars standing in this space. At first glance, they thought they were naturally formed crystal pillars, but they were actually formed from God's bones. Not only were these top-quality materials, they were also the most important inheritance. There were divine runes on the surface of each giant pillar, which were actually ancient cultivation techniques and secret techniques. They were the most important treasures left behind by the moon god's descendants. "What are you standing there for?" Chu Tian and the little fox couldn't help already. "Let's quickly go take a look." Chu Tian had just taken a few steps when he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. There was a beam of energy coming from the moon god's ruins and Chu Tian was shocked. He quickly jumped through space and instantly went back. "What is this damn thing?" Everyone felt the ground tremble. 6 giants covered in divine light came out of the moon god's ruins. Each giant was over 10 meters tall and it was impossible to see their faces, but from the powerful energy fluctuations they released, they weren't fellows that were easy to deal with. Eunice knit his brows. These are the divine guards left behind by the moon god's ruins to protect the moon god's ruins from being stolen by outsiders. These giants are all above the 7th Heaven Domain layer. 7th Heaven Domain layer? They were already peak experts on this continent. The most terrifying thing was that these giants were formed from the moon god's divine sense, so they were immortal in this space. Even if they suffered any damage, they could instantly recover. It was impossible to estimate their numbers, but it wouldn't be small. With these fellows guarding this place, who could take the treasures? "What are you waiting for? Quickly stop them," Eunice said in an awkward voice. "Sorry, the Dark Night Elves only passed down the method to open the ruins. As for how to stop the divine guards, it has already been lost over the years, so even we don't know." Why didn't you say this earlier? Chu Tian simply wanted to spit out vulgarities. The 6 giants had already charged in front of them, and each one had a powerful aura. The moonlight condensed into a giant sword and spear, attacking them with a shocking might. Chapter 6:13. The moon god guards were very strong, but it was a good thing that other than Chu Tian, the other people here weren't weak, at least they weren't below the moon god guards. The Dark Knight Elven King Yunus was in the peak 9th heaven domain layer and his strength was unimaginable, easily suppressing the moon god guards. But it was only a temporary suppression. The moon god guards couldn't be killed in the moon god's ruins at all. Their self-recovery speed was more than 100 times faster than the normal Moon Clan monsters on the moon's surface. As soon as the battle broke out, it caused a huge commotion, attracting the moon god guards from other areas. In just a short while, the number of moon god guards had increased to more than 10. This was the strength of several 7th heaven domain layer experts. Everyone felt the pressure increase. Yunus never thought that the defenses of the moon god's ruins would be this strong, so he could only helplessly suggest to everyone, the defenses of the moon god's ruins are too strong, we might meet danger if we force our way in. How about we go back and gather more experts before exploring again? The others nodded. Although the moon god's ruins were very attractive, the current situation didn't allow them to temporarily retreat. The moon god's ruins had already met such a large resistance. Who knew what dangers they would meet if they went deeper? The moon god's ruins was a powerful ancient god. The defenses of the moon god's ruins couldn't be as simple as a group of guards. If their guesses weren't wrong, the deeper they went, the more terrifying ancient restrictions there would be. If they were chased by the moon god guards, they would need to be on guard against the traps left by the ancient gods. Even with Yunus's strength, they would still fall into a dangerous situation. Yunus and the others all expressed their desire to retreat. Who would have thought that the weakest Chu Tian would disagree at this time? Don't be anxious, I think I have a way. The defenses of the moon god's ruins are actually controlled by the divine sense left behind by the ancient gods. Therefore, as long as we can disperse the divine sense of the ancient gods, the defenses of the moon god's ruins will collapse. Although this is true, how could it be easy? Yunus didn't agree with Chu Tian's risk, not to mention the other traps, just these divine guards are not something we can deal with. The divine guards had limitless strength and were undying. If there were more than 10 of them, they would still be able to resist, but if there were more of them, it would definitely be difficult to resist. Chu Tian didn't say anything and the little fox made a move. No one could clearly see what happened, but the little fox sent out seals in the air. These seals were like meteors that hit the moon god's guard and a shocking scene appeared. The moon god's guard was pinned down and couldn't move at all. After about 4 or 5 seconds of stalemate, they exploded one by one and countless fragments were gathered by the little fox. A portion of this energy was swallowed by the little fox and the other part gathered around the little fox, making the little fox's body expand by 100 times. It turned into an incomparably large 5-tailed demon fox. The fox let out a low cry and fiercely slammed its large paw on the ground. The spot where the paw landed left a dazzling light. The light rapidly spread in all directions and interweaved into an incomparably enormous formation. The divine guards who could have instantly regenerated were affected by the formation and their regenerating speed was greatly reduced. Everyone was shocked. This fox suppressed the power of God? There's nothing strange about this. Chu Tian had guessed that the little fox could suppress these divine guards, but he never thought that the little fox would do it so beautifully. This fellow's ancestor is the great desolate 9-tailed demonic god, capturing heavenly dragons and undying birds as food. Its strength is not inferior to the moon gods. Although it hasn't matured yet, it can suppress the guards refined from the moon god's remnant consciousness. I think it's more than enough. The Dark Knight elves and the experts of the Alliance never thought this. Chu Tian's pet had such a big background. With the fox's help, perhaps they could succeed. Chu Tian pointed at the several balls of light floating in the air that were gathering energy from all directions. The fox's formation can only slow down the moon god's guards' regeneration, but it can't stop them. We need to leave a few people here to continuously scatter the energy gathered. Eunice said to the two elven elders, I ask the two of you to stay. The two elven elders nodded, yes. Chu Tian gave the little fox a look, and the little fox reached out with its claws to grab Chu Tian. It wasn't known if it was intentional, but it actually placed Chu Tian on its shoulder. Normally it was the fox that lay on Chu Tian's shoulder. They never thought that there would be a day when Chu Tian would stand on the fox's shoulder. Everyone follow me. Chu Tian released his divine sense. They hadn't gone far. There is a restriction in front of us. The method to break it is like this. Chu Tian was the weakest among them, and now even the little fox was stronger than him. But Chu Tian's abilities and knowledge were incomparable. When he worked together with the little fox and Eunice and the others, even the restriction in the moon god's ruins couldn't trap him. This group of people passed through more and more restrictions, encountering quite a few moon god's guards along the way. Every time they were attacked by the moon god's guards, the little fox would gather them together and suppress them in one fell swoop. At this time, there would be one or two people in the group to stop the energy from gathering. As they continued to explore the ruins, there were fewer and fewer people by Chu Tian's side. Finally there was only Chu Tian, Eunice, and Lancelot left. They were already close to the center of the moon god's ruins. Chu Tian found that in the center of the ruins, there was a rainbow-colored crystal that was releasing a strong divine sense fluctuation. The moon god's divine sense. Divine sense was a kind of thing that didn't have a shape or state. It was illusory, but it truly existed. What people never thought was that the moon god's divine sense would condense into a crystal and exist in a solid form. This giant crystal was controlling the entire moon god's ruins and the entire moon. Over 20 moon god's guards appeared from all directions. The fox directly swallowed them all at once and slammed its claws on the ground, using the demonic beast's array to suppress them. Let me deal with the moon god's will. Chu Tian said to the two elven kings, I'll leave these annoying guards to you. Eunice was a bit stunned. Although the great moon god has fallen, the ancient god's will is immortal. This tens of thousands of evolutions has already formed an independent consciousness and a new existence. Its strength is something you can't imagine. It's too dangerous for you to do this. Ha ha ha, how can there be a harvest without taking risks? Chu Tian charged at the moon god's divine sense crystal. Chu Tian had been in the true spirit realm for a long time. This was a very precious and suitable opportunity to break through. Chapter 6:14. The moon god had already fallen. But for a being as strong as the moon god, its consciousness and soul had already been separated. Even if its soul was completely destroyed, the consciousness attached to its body could still be preserved. After several tens of thousands of years of evolution, it would finally form an independent consciousness. Now the divine sense crystal in front of him. It was this kind of thing. Before Chu Tian even got close, the divine sense crystal could already feel Chu Tian's thoughts. This mortal actually wanted to swallow it. This made the spiritual god's consciousness very angry. Although the consciousness was reflected in the way of thinking and had nothing to do with the moon god of the past, the consciousness still carried part of the moon god's memories, and the high and mighty pride of the moon god still remained. How could he tolerate a mere mortal coveting him? Kill him! Kill him! When Chu Tian was still 100 feet away, he suddenly felt a wave of divine sense surging towards him. This energy was like an endless ocean, instantly covering his body. Like a raging wave hitting the shore, an angry wave soared into the sky. In front of Chu Tian's vision domain divine sense, it was as small as a leaf. You're just a trivial ancient god's remnant consciousness. What is there to be proud of? Chu Tian's source spirit soared into the sky and his eyes turned golden, representing his divine sense. In terms of total divine sense, Chu Tian was like a small boat floating in the ocean. The ocean was giant. The boat was small. However, no matter how strong the ocean was, the boat still moved forward and was not swallowed. Although it was inferior in terms of quantity, its quality far surpassed it. Chu Tian's technique was something this consciousness could not grasp. No matter how strong the consciousness released, Chu Tian could always skillfully dodge and dissolve it. 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. The ocean in front of Chu Tian was becoming more and more turbulent, and he could feel the resistance becoming stronger. This kind of battle could not be seen with the naked eye, and there was no damage to the surrounding environment, but this battle was more dangerous than any attack. Once Chu Tian's divine sense boat was submerged in the consciousness's divine sense sea, Chu Tian's divine sense would be instantly shattered. If it was light, his divine sense would be destroyed and he would never be able to use his divine sense again. Moreover, his soul would be damaged and he would die on the spot. He would even be controlled by the consciousness and become a puppet of the other side. Very risky. Chu Tian was very clear on what he was doing, but compared to the large benefits, he felt that this risk was worth it. This little bit of ability can't stop me. Chu Tian's eyes released a golden glow and the entire nine-eyed demon god source spirit seemed to be covered in a golden glow. The divine sense boat also released a dazzling golden glow and its power increased by several times. It was like a sharp sword breaking through the waves as it pierced through the sea. Finally he arrived in front of the divine sense crystal. Chu Tian felt that his divine sense was being consumed very quickly, but at the same time, Chu Tian was clearly aware that the real battle had just begun. His body suddenly ignited and blue and white flames continued to pour out, instantly covering his surroundings. At the same time, the divine sense crystal was being refined by it. Like this, Chu Tian was directly in contact with the consciousness. Chu Tian felt like his brain was being smashed by a siege hammer. The entire world seemed to shatter as he was sucked into the divine sense sea. Chu Tian stood on a small golden boat and was surrounded by the silver ocean. The silver ocean waves slammed against the golden boat. Although the golden boat looked very ordinary, no matter how the waves crashed against it, it was still intact and continued to float on the endless silver ocean. At this time, the silver ocean began to change. An incomparably large whirlpool appeared in the center of the silver ocean. From nothing, from small to large, it covered most of the ocean in a short period of time. A strong suction force tried to tear the golden boat to pieces. Chu Tian did not panic and nimbly controlled the small boat to hover around the edge of the whirlpool. No matter how strong the whirlpool was, it could not suck the small boat in. But during this process, the silver ocean quickly shrank. The silver ocean water was gathered in one place by the whirlpool and was finally compressed to a high density. The entire ocean dried up, but where the ocean disappeared, a silver giant slowly stood up. The giant was not too tall. It was around 15 meters tall. This giant, which was only 15 meters tall, was formed by absorbing the energy of the entire sea of consciousness. Its body emitted a silver metallic light, and every inch of its body seemed to be filled with invincible power. Its entire body was covered in a dazzling light, as if the ancient moon god in the legends had been resurrected. Oh damn it! Chu Tian had never thought that the consciousness form would have such a trick up its sleeve. The main reason why it was unable to destroy Chu Tian's divine sense was that the consciousness form's power was too scattered. It didn't know how to concentrate all of its energy, so even though it had a great momentum, it was just a facade. But now, the situation was completely different. The consciousness body's power was condensed in an unbelievable way. The silver giant raised his hands high up, and an incomparably huge silver sword was taking shape bit by bit. The sword was completely made of light, and it was engraved with runes that could destroy divine sense. The silver giant held the sword with both hands, and furiously chopped down. The silver sword light could illuminate heaven and earth. It was like a 10,000-meter wave was released. Chu Tian's expression immediately became ugly. This attack could not be avoided. The golden boat began to change and instantly turned into a golden shield in front of him. The silver wave-like sword light heavily hit the golden shield, causing it to cave in and a part of it to completely shatter. No way! The power of the two was not on the same level. Chu Tian felt that his divine sense had been heavily damaged. For the consciousness body, this attack just now was just a casual attack. This consciousness body's endurance was far stronger than Chu Tian had imagined, so it was impossible to win in a head-on clash. The silver giant raised its sword again. A storm gathered on the blade. Chu Tian knew that if the next sword was used, its power would probably be twice as strong as before. Chu Tian's divine sense shield would be completely torn to pieces. There was basically no way to avoid it. If he lost the protection of the divine sense shield, Chu Tian's consciousness would definitely be destroyed by the moonlight sword. He could only risk it. While the silver giant was preparing the storm, Chu Tian also began to move. The golden divine sense shield automatically dissolved and turned into a golden spear. Chu Tian held the spear in one hand and a large amount of runes began to spread out from where Chu Tian was holding it. Chu Tian had used all the divine sense destroying secret techniques, and source spirit's power he could think of to support this divine sense spear. The surface of the golden spear was covered in golden flames. This fire was no ordinary fire, it was the source fire of Chu Tian's divine sense. Chu Tian had poured all of his divine sense's power into this attack without holding anything back. This meant that whether or not this attack succeeded, Chu Tian's divine sense would be greatly reduced. The silver giant's storm had just finished brewing. An incomparably large treasure sword was about to be raised. Chu Tian knew that if he didn't make a move now, it would be too late. He did not leave any divine sense to defend, he poured all of his strength into this spear. The moment it fell, the golden spear slammed into the silver giant's chest and the golden light collided with the silver light. The silver giant was pushed back and a pained and angry roar came from its body. An explosive sound rang out. The golden divine sense spear pierced through the silver giant's chest and came out from its back. The silver giant's spine seemed to have been pulled out and it fell to the ground like a mountain of gold and jade. Chu Tian revealed a look of joy. Did he kill it? If he could kill this fellow in a single move, it would not be a waste of his divine sense. As long as the moon god's consciousness was killed, no matter how much divine sense Chu Tian lost, he could make up for it. This thought had just appeared. Chu Tian was pulled back to reality. The silver giant's body twitched a few times before it slowly crawled up from the ground. Although there was a meter-wide hole in its chest and there were golden flames burning inside, it seemed like it wasn't affected at all. It was like it had accidentally tripped and crawled back up. The golden flames in the hole slowly disappeared. The silver light that flowed through the hole once again solidified. The silver giant's body recovered at an unbelievable speed. In other words, Chu Tian's full-strength attack did not even cause the slightest bit of damage to the silver giant. At this time, the silver hands began to condense the treasure sword again and a storm of energy appeared on the treasure sword. This is bad. When Chu Tian quickly dodged, the silver wave passed by and his consciousness was almost destroyed. However, he couldn't dodge it a second time. This kind of attack was not worth mentioning to the silver giant at all. What should he do? Chu Tian found himself in a very bad situation. Although he had 9 different powers in the divine sense space, he could only use the consciousness to resist the divine sense, he could not use the other powers at all. Chu Tian had already used up all his divine sense in that attack. Facing the silver giant's attack, he did not even have a chance to block it. He would die without a doubt. Chu Tian thought of something. Other than the 9 powers of the 9-eyed demon god, didn't Father also have a power that he had never used before? This was the power that the other ancient god had planted in him in the central state tower. It was this ancient power that allowed the 9-eyed demon god to have another eye. The 9-eyed demon god's eye represented a corresponding power. The 10th eye meant a 10th power. But it was a pity that the eye had appeared a long time ago, but it had never opened. Chapter 6:15. The silver giant raised the giant sword of light high up and a dazzling light was released, covering the entire space like a surging sea. Chu Tian wanted to dodge, but he didn't have time to move. The energy released by the giant sword turned into a strong pressure. It was like 100 giant mountains falling down. Chu Tian was firmly suppressed in place. He felt that he couldn't even move his pinky finger. The vast energy within the silver giant's body gathered into its arms, gathered into the sword, and finally condensed into a dazzling silver river. When the blade of light streaked across, the entire space was torn apart by the dazzling silver light, completely splitting the sky in half. This was no longer a normal attack. This was the full-strength attack of the Silver Giant's consciousness. This consciousness was born from the Moon God's divine sense, and now it could completely control the Moon God's divine sense. It could freely use the divine sense of the ancient spiritual god, and not mentioning other aspects, at least in terms of divine sense, this fellow's strength was close to a demigod's. A demigod's attack, how could he block it? Although the ancient spiritual god had warned Chu Tian that he couldn't casually open the 10th eye, otherwise it would bring him irreversible consequences. Did Chu Tian still have a choice now? The consciousness formed from the Moon God's divine sense far surpassed his imagination. Even if the divine sense wasn't exhausted, with Chu Tian's trivial vision domain divine sense, he would still die under this kind of strong attack without any suspense. Although the risk was large. But he had to endure it. Since you want to go all out, then I'll go all out with you. Chu Tian's consciousness slowly entered his source spirit. The 10th eye's power was sealed, so Chu Tian had to take the initiative to enter the depths of his source spirit to open it. The entire divine sense world disappeared. A completely new space appeared around him. This was an incomparably huge divine palace complex. Each divine palace stood proudly on the ground, and each divine palace had a different color and style. The green divine palace was brimming with life energy, the black divine palace was enveloped with a black hole-like gravitational force, the white divine palace was shaking with spatial ripples, the silver divine palace was flowing with traces of time, the purple divine palace was filled with the aura of souls, and the red divine palace was filled with violent power. Of course, this was not a real world. Each temple was a manifestation of a source spirit. There were 10 temples in Chu Tian's source spirit world, each representing the 10 kinds of powers that Chu Tian had. The doors of 9 temples were open, releasing a vast sea of energy. There was a special temple that was an exception. Although the 9 divine halls were different from each other, they were connected to one another. This divine hall, however, existed independently. It was obviously smaller, and the door was tightly sealed by a rusty chain. The power of the 10th eye. Break it, release it. A pitch-black sword with blue and white flames coiled around it appeared in Chu Tian's hand. He hurriedly released a dazzling sword light and hacked on the rusted iron chain. The destructive power that gushed out from the sword could only create a small crack on the iron chain. On the contrary, the sword blade was nearly knocked out of his hand. Damn it! This seemingly fragile chain was actually so difficult to deal with? Chu Tian knew that he was in danger, so he didn't have time to think about it. Chu Tian raised the burning black sword high into the air, and the 9 divine halls behind him began to tremble. Each divine hall released a strand of demonic and divine power. The 9 strands of demonic and divine power revolved above his head, like 9 vicious dragons. In the end, they all poured into the black sword. Break! Chu Tian gathered the 9-eyed demon god's energy and slashed at the sealing chain. The chain finally broke into several pieces, but there was a powerful backlash that came from within. Chu Tian was pushed back several dozen meters, and the 9 temples began to tremble. If it wasn't for the fact that Chu Tian's source spirit was strong, just this backlash would have caused a normal god-level source spirit to collapse. Open for me! Chu Tian knew that since he had already done it, there was no reason for him to regret it. Chu Tian quickly charged in front of the temple, and his hands pressed against the thick and heavy palace door. A deep roar came from his mouth, and a crack appeared in front of him. It was just a crack, but the energy that came from inside was like thousands of steel needles that fell onto Chu Tian's body. Too terrifying. Too strong. Chu Tian was sent flying back 100 meters. It was like an earthquake had occurred in the entire source spirit world. Hundreds and thousands of cracks appeared in the ground, covering the entire source spirit world. Chu Tian felt his soul being severely shaken. This bit of power that leaked out was enough to scatter his soul. The 9 temples released light at the same time. In the end, it was barely able to stop the cracks from spreading, finally preventing his source spirit from collapsing. Chu Tian's little life was barely saved, but his soul was heavily injured. It would be a hidden danger in his future cultivation and battles. This was the price he had to pay to forcefully open the 10th door. even if he had to pay such a heavy price. Chu Tian had only opened a crack in the door. Chu Tian left the source spirit world and returned to the divine sense world. The process of opening the door seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it only lasted for a short moment. The silver giant had just swept the giant sword in front of him, and what it held in its hand was no longer a sword, but a majestic galaxy. This was an earth-shattering divine sense slash. Perhaps even an emperor-level character would find it hard to block it. When Chu Tian was about to turn to ashes, one of the eyes in the middle of the nine-eyed demon god source spirit that had always been closed suddenly opened a crack. Chu Tian's eyes seemed to disappear, leaving behind a transparent color. This kind of emptiness was not empty, rather this kind of emptiness was everything, encompassing the heaven and earth, seeing through all beings. This giant sword releasing a silver glow stopped in front of Chu Tian. This majestic silver river seemed like it had been frozen. Although the silver river was still majestic, it no longer had the ability to flow. The invisible energy wrapped around the silver sword, as if it had been torn apart by countless hands, or as if a river had been dried up by the blazing sun. This attack, which could destroy any spiritual sense on the continent, had been turned into nothingness on the spot in an unimaginable way. The silver giant's body trembled. This was the fear that came from the consciousness. Although the consciousness had never seen this kind of power before, from the moon god's remnant memories, even a real moon god would feel fear when facing this kind of power. Not to mention this independent will that came from the moon god's divine sense. This power surpassed the elements, surpassed the material, surpassed the spirit, surpassed the soul, and surpassed time and space. It was above all beings, surpassing everything in the world, but it ruled over all beings, controlling time and everything. This was a power that surpassed everything. Even a powerful spiritual god could not resist it. This energy did not have an accurate description. People called it fate. Chapter 6:16. The power of fate had no attributes, no physical body, no rules, and was very difficult to detect. This theory sounded very mysterious, but it actually existed. Not only did it exist, but it was also everywhere. Everything in the world. Everything in the world, whether it was living or inanimate, whether it was a powerful deity or a tiny speck of dust, it was fate that caused everything to change. Fate was the only power that couldn't be understood or resisted. Some people thought that they could overcome fate, but it was actually just a form of self-consolation, and even this self-consolation was the result of fate itself. No matter how powerful one was, no matter how high one's cultivation was, fate was something that couldn't be broken. Chu Tian released his power of fate. Of course, Chu Tian's power of fate was very weak. The power of fate that flowed in this world was like an ocean, while the power of fate that Chu Tian currently possessed was like a grain of sand in that ocean. Although Chu Tian's power of fate was very weak, it was more than enough to change the fate of one or two people. This attack. Chu Tian's soul should have been destroyed. In a situation where Chu Tian had no way to resist, he released his destiny power at this critical moment. The destiny power's effect was not like other energies that could resist the silver giant. If it was just a direct confrontation, it would be too low class. Fate didn't care about resisting anything. Fate directly changed the course of events. Chu Tian's soul should have been destroyed, but it wasn't. The silver giant's attack shouldn't have been blocked, but it was blocked and disappeared. There was no principle. There was no rule. Fate took drastic measures to remove the firewood from under the pot. It forcefully changed the result. Just like when two people were debating whether 1 + 1 = 2 or not, someone called fate jumped out and changed the question to 1 - 1. This was how heaven-defying the power of fate was. This was how powerful the power of fate was. It could ignore all existing laws and existences, directly changing and erasing them from the source. If someone could truly control the power of fate, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be changed. There was no one in this world that couldn't be killed. All laws and laws were nothing but jokes in front of them. They could be created with a flip of their hand and destroyed with a flip of their hand. This kind of existence was a true god. The seed of destiny power had already sprouted in Chu Tian's body. However, it wasn't very powerful at the moment, and the amount of power that Chu Tian could use was even less. After barely dealing with the Silver Giant's earth-shattering attack, Chu Tian's destiny power was almost completely exhausted. Die! Chu Tian gathered all the energy that was involved, and like a needle, he stabbed it into the core of the consciousness body. Chu Tian directly erased the most fundamental part of the consciousness body. The consciousness body could not resist this attack at all, and it let out a hysterical cry. The divine sense crystal in the moon god ruins exploded. The entire silver giant exploded. Countless condensed spiritual consciousnesses once again turned into a raging ocean, instantly submerging Chu Tian within it. Chu Tian's eyes returned to normal. Although there didn't seem to be any external injuries, the injury this time was more serious than any other time. Although the power of destiny was very powerful, the backlash it caused was also very shocking. Chu Tian's soul and mind were already riddled with holes. Fortunately, Chu Tian's target was the consciousness body. The divine sense crystal in the moon god's ruins was slowly being refined by the flames, turning into strands of energy that were absorbed by Chu Tian. Because his soul had just been injured, there was still time to repair it. Divine sense, a large amount of divine sense, and the moon god's source divine sense all rushed over. This divine sense was several hundred to 1,000 times stronger than the one he encountered in the death ice field. Chu Tian was like a giant sponge holding onto the divine sense crystal, letting the divine sense crystal melt and seep into his body. Chu Tian's cultivation began to wildly increase. This body that had been modified by the demon god had a perfect foundation, and now he had swallowed the moon god's power. Chu Tian's cultivation broke through to the 9th true spirit layer without any suspense. A vast energy filled the entire moon god's ruins. The moon god guards that were desperately trying to revive suddenly felt like light bulbs that had been turned off. The intense tremors spread from the moon god ruins to the entire moon, and all of the moon race creatures seemed to be frozen in place. This was because the will that was affecting them had already disappeared. The attacks of these moon race monsters were greatly reduced. When the moon finished shaking, a powerful aura was released. There was a mist-like energy that passed through the surface of the moon, instantly covering a large area. What is that? Quickly look. The people of the continent looked up. There was a 9-eyed demon god's shadow in the sky. The 9 eyes were like high-up gods, coldly looking down at the lowly life forms on the ground. Big Brother Chu Tian has broken through, Vivian excitedly said in Miracle City, but isn't he making too much noise, letting the entire continent see him? Nan Gongyun laughed, our boss is just this willful. Meng Qingwu and Meng Yingying both revealed looks of joy. The more exaggerated this phenomenon was, the harder it was to break through and the greater the harvest. Chu Tian had gone from the true spirit realm to the heaven domain realm. He had gone from being one of the top experts on the continent to being one of the strongest experts on the continent. This was a qualitative leap. This was a giant breakthrough. Actually, Chu Tian was in charge of all of Miracle Commerce's resources. Even if there were no fortuitous encounters, with the resources accumulated by the company, he would still reach the heaven domain realm in half a year. Breaking through in the moon god's ruins was something to celebrate, but what was even more precious to Chu Tian was that because he had swallowed the moon god's remnant divine sense, Chu Tian's divine sense had grown by a large amount. It had now surpassed the vision domain realm and reached the undying realm. Hyperfocus, mind's eye, mind's lamp, vision domain, undying. Chu Tian's divine sense had reached the 5th realm. Not to mention this era, even in the ancient era, it was very rare. There were some demons and gods that only had undying divine sense. When a being's divine sense reached the undying realm, this being's body and spirit would have a fundamental change. In other words, Chu Tian's dependence on his body had decreased by a large amount. Even if his body suffered a fatal injury, Chu Tian's soul wouldn't immediately dissipate. Even if his head was heavily injured, Chu Tian's ability to think wouldn't be interrupted. This was the benefit of the undying divine sense. Chu Tian gradually broke free of his body's bindings. He was a being that transcended ordinary living beings. Even if his soul left his body, he could still exist for a long time. Now that his head was gone, he could still think. His divine sense wouldn't scatter and his soul wouldn't be extinguished. To other beings, this was simply unimaginable. Chapter 6:17. Chu Tian gradually restrained his aura and woke up. When he opened his eyes, there was a 9-colored glow in his eyes. Eunice, Lancelot, and the others that participated in the exploration of the moon god's ruins were all gathered beside Chu Tian. They all had different expressions, but the only thing they had in common was shock and admiration. Could they not be shocked? They were all heaven domain experts and their cultivations weren't low. Who among them could create a heaven-shaking momentum like Chu Tian when they broke through to the heaven domain realm? Not to mention them, even in history, they had never heard of a precedent like this. Could they not be filled with admiration? Chu Tian had directly fought against the core consciousness of the moon in the moon god's ruins. This consciousness was formed from the moon god's divine sense and remnant soul fragments. Spiritual gods were immortal existences and they had never heard of any power that could kill a spiritual god. This consciousness could be considered a demigod existence, but it was actually personally killed by Chu Tian. Everyone looked at the 9-colored light and they couldn't help trembling. It was like being stared at by a demon god. They couldn't help feeling awe and shock. Chu Tian immediately restrained the light and returned to normal, even restraining his aura even more than before. Actually, after reaching the heaven domain realm, the 9-eyed demon god's power had truly awakened and he could now fully display the power of the 9-eyed demon god source spirit. The heaven domain realm and true spirit realm was not just the difference in strength, it was also the difference between high and low. Even a short-lived human could live for 801,000 years once they entered the heaven domain realm. This human's growth speed was too terrifying. Lancelot remembered that when Chu Tian first came to the Forest of Chaos a year ago, he was only an awakened soul cultivator that hadn't even reached the true spirit realm. In less than 2 years, he had actually completed a path that most elves wouldn't be able to complete in 200 years. The continent had another heaven domain expert. The continent had another peak expert. Lancelot said with a faint smile, "Congratulations to the city lord for making a large breakthrough in your cultivation." Thunder's Fury, Burst Claw, Deathwing, and Bo Sha came to congratulate him. If Chu Tian hadn't reached the heaven domain realm, no matter how high Chu Tian's status was, the 5 giants would still be biased against him. But now that Chu Tian had reached the heaven domain realm, whether it was status or ability, he was on equal footing with them. This time Chu Tian's breakthrough was not just a personal breakthrough, it was also a breakthrough for Miracle City. Chu Tian would establish himself as the highest leader of the Forest of Chaos and Miracle City would become the core of the Forest of Chaos. Chu Tian nodded. "It's all thanks to everyone that I was able to break through this bottleneck. I'll repay everyone when I get back. How is the situation at the moon god's ruins?" Eunice seemed to be very excited. After the city lord defeated the divine sense's parent body, all the moon god guards are no longer repairing themselves. We can now control the moon god palace and excavate the moon god's ruins treasures. Chu Tian glanced to the side. There was a dim ball of light quietly floating there. The moon god's parent body had already stopped working and these powerful moon god guards had temporarily lost their ability to regenerate, but their source had not been destroyed just because the moon god's parent body was destroyed. Chu Tian released his divine sense and poured it into the moon god guard source. His divine sense could easily connect to the moon god guard without any rejection. With a thought from Chu Tian, the moon god guard's source body lit up and wildly absorbed energy from the surroundings, turning into a giant in just a short while. Eunice revealed a look of shock. "This is..." Chu Tian said with a faint smile, "Your Majesty, there is no need to be shocked. I've refined the moon god's parent body and although I can't control all the moon's creatures like the moon god's parent body, I can still reconstruct some life forms and change their movements, making them less aggressive." After the moon god guard was regenerated, it stood there like a block of wood, like it didn't see them at all. Chu Tian had this kind of ability, he could control all the moon's life forms. On the moon, Chu Tian could be considered an invincible existence. It was a pity he couldn't bring him to the surface, otherwise with just the army of the moon's life forms, Chu Tian could declare an empire. From today on, the moon god's palace and the moon god's ruins will be guarded by the dark night elves. I will build a transport tower for the moon god's palace that will be connected to the dark night forest in the future. Chu Tian already controlled the entire moon. If Chu Tian went back on his word, Eunice couldn't do anything. But Chu Tian didn't do this. The Dark Night Forest was one of the most influential powers on the continent, and Chu Tian didn't want the alliance to become enemies with the Dark Night Elves for a little benefit. It wasn't worth it. The moon god's palace was useless to the alliance. Moon god's ruins? It couldn't be denied that the inheritance, resources, and wealth were shocking, but the moon race's inheritance wasn't very useful to the alliance. As for the shocking amount of wealth, although it was very attractive, with Miracle City's current position, how could they not be able to buy a few immortal herbs? Not to mention that the moon god's ruins were only guarded by the Dark Night Elves, and the excavations would have to be done with Miracle City's moon base. The Dark Night Elves couldn't eat it alone. Chu Tian killing the main consciousness body was a huge contribution to the opening of the ruins. Since we've come here, we can't leave empty-handed. Chu Tian directed everyone as he said, let's first do a simple exploration of the moon god's ruins. The Dragon Lord and the others wished for this. The moon god's ruins would be the Dark Night Elves and Miracle City's resource area in the future. The other powers couldn't find a suitable reason to take a share, so it was better to take a few immortal herbs back. It would be enough for them to break through. Everyone split up. They each explored the ruins. Chu Tian's attention was attracted by the fragments on the ground. These fragments were left behind by the Divine Sense Crystal. Chu Tian told the little fox to collect the Divine Sense fragments. These fragments didn't have any value to Chu Tian, but they were priceless to others. The Divine Sense Crystal was condensed from the Divine Sense Source. The Divine Sense Source could be directly absorbed. In other words, each fragment of the Divine Sense Crystal could be used to directly increase one's Divine Sense. Chu Tian brought the fragments back for the young miss and the others to use. He didn't dare say that their Divine Sense would be very strong, but they would at least be able to easily break through to the mind's lamp realm. Little fox, we can't come here for nothing. Chu Tian put away the several fragments of the Divine Sense Crystal. Look around. If there are any good herbs, just take them back. There's no need to trouble yourself in the future. The little fox had this thought and immediately began to sniff around to search for treasures. Chu Tian followed behind the little fox, and in just a short while, he had already picked 10 high-grade immortal herbs. Whether these immortal herbs were for Chu Tian's own cultivation or for others to use, they were all very valuable. The little fox suddenly smelled something special and excitedly gestured at Chu Tian a few times. Chu Tian didn't even have time to understand before it impatiently went deeper into the moon god's ruins. Little fox, slow down. What is going on? What did you find? The little fox walked into a cave. There was a medium-sized pool in this cave, and there was a translucent silver liquid flowing in the pool. Chu Tian could feel that this was an ancient god's blood essence and spinal cord. It could be considered a supreme immortal treasure that could change one's physique, allowing one to transcend mortal bodies. This pool was covered with a large number of silver leaves, and each leaf could be considered an immortal treasure. In the center of the countless leaves, there was a full and beautiful silver flower. This rosewood released an extremely rare aura. Spiritual god aura. Chu Tian could basically affirm that this was a precious medicine with a divine nature. In simpler terms, a divine medicine. Chapter 6:18. The continent's materials were divided into normal grade, spirit grade, sacred grade, immortal grade, and god grade. Among these materials, especially the herbs, as long as they were old enough, they could all become elixirs. Sacred herbs had very strict requirements for growing, so they could only be produced in a specific place. As for immortal herbs, not only did they need a long nurturing time and a harsh environment, they also needed a heaven-defying opportunity to be born. Therefore, they could only be found and not sought. The herb in front of Chu Tian was actually a divine herb that had already awakened its divinity. Although it couldn't be considered a complete divine herb, it was at least on the level of a demigod. How precious was a divine herb? There weren't many of them on the entire continent. This was because divine herbs had divinity and should have existed in the same era as demons and gods. After the great desolate continent was destroyed, the continent didn't have an environment to cultivate divine herbs at all. The reason this herb could reach its current level was mainly because it had been nurtured by the moon god's spirit and essence. After being nurtured for tens of thousands of years, it finally reached its current level. This was a herb that was about to become a divine herb. Even if all the immortal herbs that Chu Tian had collected were added up, they couldn't compare to this one. Chu Tian couldn't help revealing a faint smile. "Fox, you're really something. I'll remember your great merit this time and you'll be heavily rewarded when we return." The little fox drooled as it stared at the divine herb. But for this divine herb, it didn't even think about it. This fellow was a rice bucket. Was there a difference if it ate good or bad? If the little fox ate a demigod herb, it would be better to give it 2,000 sacred herbs to eat. The added effect was the same as eating a demigod herb for the little fox. With Miracle Commerce's current ability, although it wasn't easy to collect 2,000 level 4 sacred herbs, finding a level 4 divine herb was something that could only be found. Chu Tian reached out his hand and grabbed the air. The demigod herb was instantly covered by an invisible energy. A low and deep explosion rang out at this time as the herb released a strong light. There was a strong energy that instantly shattered Chu Tian's energy. Chu Tian was slightly surprised. There was hostility coming from within the precious medicine. It was resisting Chu Tian's grasp. It turned out that this stock of divine medicine had already formed its own consciousness after countless years and possessed the ability to think. If Chu Tian wanted to pluck it away, how could it not display hostility? The entire cave began to tremble. Before Chu Tian could do anything, the precious medicine suddenly blossomed with a light that didn't disperse. This layer of light formed a huge silhouette around it. It was the image of a silver qilin. This silver qilin was not a corporeal entity. It was purely an illusion of energy. However, the energy contained within the qilin's body was not weak. Its might was no different from a real qilin. Roar! The qilin let out an angry roar, causing the entire cave to shake. It leapt up and seemed to stir up a storm, violently and fiercely smashing into Chu Tian. Chu Tian pulled out the divine demon sword from the void and slashed out with the black sword. The instant the two forces collided, Chu Tian was blasted back 100 feet and slammed into the stone wall. The moon didn't have any rock formations. This crystal wall was as hard as steel, but Chu Tian was like a knife stabbing into a cake, easily sinking in. There were several dozen meters of cracks all around him. The might of this attack could be seen from this. Spatial fluctuations. Chu Tian was directly sent out. Although he had suffered a fierce attack, his expression was still calm. The starlight immortal body had been strengthened and the power of the demon and god had changed it, so Chu Tian's physique had already surpassed the limits of mortals. Although the silver qilin's attack was very fierce, it didn't harm Chu Tian at all. This attack could roughly deduce the strength of the illusionary beast, which was around the 6th to 7th heaven domain layer. Chu Tian had indeed reached the heaven domain realm, but he was only in the 1st heaven domain layer. If he wanted to deal with this monster, it would be a bit difficult. The silver qilin's claw slapped the ground and it was prepared to jump up again. "Fox, go!" The little fox turned into a demonic fox and collided with the qilin. The two monsters began to fight in the cave. After the little fox turned into a demonic fox, its battle strength reached the heaven domain realm. Although it was weaker than the silver qilin, one couldn't forget that the silver qilin wasn't a real body and was formed from energy. The demonic fox bit the silver qilin's body and the light around it quickly dimmed. The silver qilin's body exploded at this time and splashed in front of the little fox like water. It gathered above its head and turned into a silver phoenix. This weak silver phoenix fell into the pond and spread its wings to fly up. In the blink of an eye, the silver phoenix's energy was completely restored. The silver phoenix spread its wings, and its body continued to explode, as if hundreds of bombs had been detonated. The surface of its body continued to erupt with silver flames, and the flames did not dissipate. All of them condensed together, and in the end, the silver phoenix turned into a blinding sun, releasing intense light and energy. This fellow was trying to self-destruct. Once this attack was released, the entire area would be flattened. Even the little fox would find it hard to block the self-destruction of the silver phoenix. The entire process was too fast. The little fox wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. The wild energy was about to be released. Chu Tian's eyes turned silver. At this time, energy that couldn't be seen with the naked eye was released from Chu Tian. It was like a small stone being thrown into a space and time domain, creating ripples. Under the pressure of several invisible ripples, the small sun that was about to explode suddenly stopped expanding, like it was being suppressed. Chu Tian didn't forcefully suppress it, and he didn't have any way to forcefully suppress it. Time freezing. Time energy. Chu Tian released his time energy and disturbed the flow of time, increasing the time it took to self-destruct by several times. This gave the little fox a chance. The demon fox released a beam of light that hit the ball of energy that didn't explode in time, instantly shattering the ball of energy. The high-density energy was completely shattered. The silver phoenix gave a sharp cry and turned into a silver flood dragon, drilling out of the center of the fireball. It fell into a pool of water once again, absorbing energy from the inside. Would there be no end to this fight? Chu Tian raised the demon god sword and slashed out in the air. An invisible spatial slash slashed at the silver flood dragon's head, and an unstoppable strength instantly shattered its head. The demon fox seized this chance to jump out, and its body expanded in the air. Just like a fox biting a snake, it bit the flood dragon in its mouth. Then it turned into a gray mist that disappeared, teleporting in front of Chu Tian. The flood dragon still tried to struggle. Chu Tian didn't give it a chance. His eyes gradually turned golden, and a wild divine sense attacked the silver flood dragon's divine sense. In front of the undying realm's divine sense, the silver flood dragon's divine sense couldn't even take a single blow and was instantly erased by Chu Tian's power. The light from the silver flood dragon's body gradually disappeared, and it finally turned into a complete herb on the ground. Chu Tian let out a long sigh. He bent down to pick up the herb. This herb was born from the moon god's spirit, so it already has a very strong divinity, but I never thought that it would awaken its own consciousness. If I was a bit weaker, I really wouldn't have been able to do anything to it. The demon fox turned back into a little fox. The master ate the meat and the fox drank the soup. The little fox didn't expect to obtain the divine herb. The pond was filled with plants, and they were all high-grade immortal treasures. The little fox wasn't polite with Chu Tian. It jumped over and took everything to fill its own pockets. We can take these immortal leaves, but we can't touch the immortal essence in the pond. We'll leave it for Yingying and the young miss. It can help them break through to the heaven domain realm in the future. Chu Tian knew what kind of personality the little fox had. If it didn't obtain any benefits at all, the next time he needed help, it might act up and not help. Exploring the moon god's ruins. Chu Tian and the little fox's harvests weren't small. Chu Tian collected 16 high-grade level 3 immortal herbs, 8 top-grade level 3 immortal herbs, 5 low and medium-grade level 4 immortal herbs, and 2 high-grade level 4 immortal herbs. Although Miracle City had several dozen immortal herbs, they were all level 3 immortal herbs. They were mostly mid and low grade, mainly suitable for cultivators under the 7th true spirit layer to quickly increase their strength. This time, Chu Tian didn't pick any high-grade immortal herbs, therefore the immortal herbs he took were all high-grade level 3 immortal herbs. This level and quality of immortal herbs could help cultivators above the 7th true spirit layer quickly increase their strength. As for the top-grade level 3 immortal herbs, they could help them break through realms. In other words, Chu Tian gave a batch of immortal herbs to everyone, basically guaranteeing Yingying, the young miss, Vivian, Nangong Yun, and the other core members of the true spirit realm. They would definitely be able to reach the heaven domain realm in a year. As for the level 4 immortal herbs, they were even more precious. After Chu Tian reached the heaven domain realm, It was hard for him to find herbs that could increase his cultivation because there were very few level 4 and above materials on the continent. Almost all level 4 materials had saint-grade medicinal effects. Normal saint-grade materials had limited effects on a heaven domain cultivator's cultivation, not to mention they could only be found and not sought. This was why the 5 leaders of the Alliance had lived for so long, but they were still stuck in the 6th to 7th heaven domain layer. It was hard for them to progress any further, and they would stay at this level for the rest of their lives. Level 4 immortal herbs could effectively increase Chu Tian's strength. These herbs could at least satisfy his cultivation needs for a period of time in the future. Chu Tian had already finished the exploration of the moon's ruins, so he said goodbye to the Dark Knight Elven King Eunice. He brought the 5 leaders who were also full of rewards and returned to Miracle City through the transport array. The City Lord's strength had broken through. This was a joyous matter for Miracle City. Chapter 619. Miracle City and the Alliance members all came out to celebrate. The various city lords even sent over precious gifts. Because of this, Chu Tian became the center of attention when he came back. He was busy socializing and couldn't leave. It seemed like being too popular was also a problem. At this time, Meng Qingwu sent a message telling Chu Tian to return to the castle. Chu Tian finally found an excuse to leave. The young miss was looking for him, so he couldn't neglect her. Chu Tian sent everyone away and immediately teleported back to the castle. Young miss, quickly come over. See what good things I've brought for you. Chu Tian took out a storage bag. This is a divine sense crystal. It will allow your divine sense to reach the mind's lamp realm. These immortal herbs will definitely help you and Yingying reach the heaven domain realm. Also, Chu Tian only said half of what he wanted to say. He felt that something was wrong. The young miss sat there without moving with a long face. Vivian had a strange expression as she stood on the side. Chu Tian's heart was filled with doubt. What was going on? Could it be that the young miss was angry? This doesn't make sense. I, Chu Tian, have always been respectful to the young miss, only lacking my body. I shouldn't have offended her. The young miss' intelligent eyes fiercely stared at him. What did you say you went to do this time? Chu Tian was confused. Everyone knows that I broke through on the moon. Meng Qingwu angrily slapped the table. Lancelot came back and told Vivian everything. Vivian has already told me everything. Do you think I don't know what you did up there? Vivian stood on the side with a bitter little face. She never thought that Meng Qingwu would be this angry. Chu Tian gave an awkward cough. Vivian, come here. Big brother Chu Tian, I'm sorry, I didn't deliberately come to complain. Vivian revealed a nervous expression, but then she firmly said, but this matter is your fault. Even if you punish me and scold me, I still have to say it. What was going on? How could I bear to punish you? These are all gifts I brought back from the moon god's ruins. Take them back first. I want to have a good talk with the young Mississippi. Vivian heaved a sigh of relief. Yes, thank you, big brother. After Vivian left, Chu Tian pulled a long face and personally poured tea for eldest Mississippi. Eldest miss, don't be angry. Aren't you back in one piece? You've gone too far this time. The moon god's ruins can't be lost on the moon. We'll explore it sooner or later, but it'll be ours sooner or later. You're being so rash. If something happens, what should we do? Meng Qingwu severely condemned Chu Tian's actions. Don't forget, you and Yingying's wedding is about to take place. All right. Don't do it again. Chu Tian very sincerely accepted the young miss' criticism and did a deep self-reflection, but it was unknown if he would repent. Chu Tian saw that the young miss' anger had dissipated a bit, so he immediately changed the topic and said, have you sent away the rulers? Meng Qingwu knew that Chu Tian was changing the topic, but this was an important matter, so she could only honestly say, I've already arranged the transport towers, logistics, communication, and etc. The rulers have already returned to their respective places and the transport towers will open soon. In around half a year, we'll be able to build a transport network that covers the entire continent. Chu Tian's eyes lit up. That fast? The day Miracle City dominates the continent isn't far. There was no need to say the transport towers. This thing could save people a lot of time and energy. It could allow people from various countries to go to places they couldn't go before, like outer space or the underground world. It had a lot of value and significance in developing the world and developing diplomatic relations. Meng Qingwu had written a report. With Miracle City as the center, the transport towers were mainly distributed in the 143 cities and special areas of the Forest Alliance. There were 102 in the Kingdom Alliance, mainly in the various imperial cities and main cities. Miracle City had a total of 245 transport towers, being produced around 50,000 times per day. Even if Miracle City earned 10 source stones per transport, Miracle City's daily income would reach 500,000 source stones. In fact, the profit from the transport towers wasn't just 10 source stones. According to the area, the price was different, but the average was several times that. Meng Qingwu was prepared to increase the number of transport towers and increase the penetration rate of the transport towers. In the future, with just the income from the transport towers, Miracle City would become the richest city in the Forest of Chaos and even the continent. The importance of the space warehouse did not lose to the transport towers at all. The banks and shopping centers all relied on the space warehouse technology. The value of the large banks in the Forest of Chaos was recognized, and the limitless potential of the Miracle shopping centers was clear to all. In the future, the space warehouse would be built and Miracle City would rent out large amounts of the space warehouse. The cost of building the space warehouse was low, but the benefits were very shocking. When the transport towers and space warehouses covered the continent, that would be the day Miracle City dominated the continent. Meng Qingwu didn't let this go to her head. Don't be happy too early, we will still face challenges from all sides. At least these empire-level powers won't allow a power that can surpass them or even control them to be born. This was indeed a very large problem. Chu Tian drank a cup of tea and asked, "Does the young miss have a way to deal with this?" "We will still focus on appeasing them in the beginning. As long as we give them enough benefits, we will be able to win them over, but in the end we still need to be strong." Meng Qingwu paused before saying, "The reason I called you over today is because there are several large projects that you need to personally look over." Chu Tian was stunned. "What is it?" Meng Qingwu replied, "If Miracle City wants to truly dominate the continent, just relying on technology isn't enough. We need to strengthen our military. I have a plan, and the initial investment is around 2 billion source stones." 2 billion source stones. Chu Tian was scared out of his wits. Miracle Commerce indeed had a large amount of wealth, but there were too many places that needed funds, so they only had around 100 million source stones. If they gathered all the income from the various places, it would be around 200 million source stones. Any more and it would affect the Yun sect and the other departments. With Miracle Commerce's current financial situation, they couldn't take out 2 billion at all. "I'm prepared to invest 200 million first and add another 200 million every month." Meng Qingwu wrote down the details of the plan and gave it to Chu Tian. This includes the construction of the large mech suit army, the construction of the large warships and military factories, the construction of the floating castles, and the construction of the various weapon systems. 2 billion source stones sounds like a lot, but it can only complete the beginning. Miracle City didn't have a solid foundation and didn't have a strong background. If they wanted to catch up to the empire-level powers, they could only rely on technology. Meng Qingwu choosing to wildly increase their military wasn't wrong, but from Meng Qingwu's plan, this amount of money was far from enough. Not to mention anything else, Miracle Commerce would need to spend at least 100 million source stones to build a large warship factory. Miracle Commerce would need to build at least 5 factories in the beginning. Other than that, each normal large warship would cost between 1 to 2 million. If Miracle City wanted to fight against the hidden power of the empire-level powers, they needed at least 400-500 large fleets. This was impossible without a strong enough financial power. Other than that, Meng Qingwu planned to build large amounts of defensive weapons in various places, like wildly digging out missile silos or deploying laser cannons in the sky. These all required large amounts of resources, and these resources had to be exchanged for source stones. Chu Tian carefully looked over the plan and nodded. Isn't it just $1 billion? Go do it. If you don't have enough source stones, you can go to the large source stone banks to take a loan. I believe this investment is worth it. Meng Qingwu obtained Chu Tian's confirmation and her heart filled with confidence. Other than that, I still have something I'm preparing. Meng Qingwu gave Chu Tian another plan. I think the alliance is a temporary measure. We will take another step sooner or later. Chu Tian opened the plan. Several large words appeared. Country creation plan. Chu Tian was shocked by Meng Qingwu's boldness. You want to create a country? This isn't a joke. Our influence includes the spirit beasts, the elves, the sea race, and over 100 other races. The internal power is also very complicated. There has never been a country like this on the continent before. We don't need to create a centralized country, and we don't need to elect an emperor. My idea is to combine all the different powers to form a giant federation while the alliance isn't strong enough. Meng Qingwu looked at Chu Tian and said, our federated country still has its own political and military power, but compared to the loose alliance, we need to elect a leader who can directly order the people to be the federation president. Meng Qingwu was not satisfied with the current situation of the alliance. Chu Tian's idea of creating an alliance wasn't bad, but an alliance was just an alliance. Everyone would work together if there was a profit to be made and they would all be on the same level. It was a bit too loose. Even if Miracle City had a high status, they couldn't directly order the people, which greatly affected the overall efficiency. Because of this, Meng Qingwu wanted to use the alliance as a foundation to create a federal country. She would elect a president and have the president lead the entire federation. There was no need to say, if this plan could be implemented. The only person qualified to be the president of the federation was Chu Tian. Chapter 620. Meng Qingwu's federation plan was in line with Miracle City's benefits. In the long run, it was in line with the group's benefits. But the federation wasn't that easy to form. The various large powers would have a psychological struggle because once the federation was formed, it meant that Miracle City's position would rise again. Chu Tian would go from a partner to a leader that could directly manage things. This was something that people couldn't accept. Who liked being controlled? Who liked having someone on the same level as them appear in their territory? Who would like to have their own clan's matters affected by an outsider? Whether it was the proud dragon lord, the old-fashioned elves, or the spirit beasts, giants, or the sea race, even if they weren't the top powers on the continent, at least they had the final say in their territories. Giving a portion of their authority to the president was not a decision that could be casually made. Even if Lancelot agreed, would the Eternal Forest elves agree? But the young miss already had this thought. Then the young miss must have a certain amount of confidence in her heart. The young miss was different from Chu Tian. She had always been cautious and would never mess around. I believe in the young miss ability, and I definitely believe in the young miss. Chu Tian was shocked by the young miss ambition, but he didn't even think about the young miss choice before agreeing. Just do it. No matter what happens, I'll be behind you. Meng Qingwu rolled her eyes at him and said, with the current miracle commerce, as long as you don't cause trouble, you'll be helping us greatly. Chu Tian was a bit depressed. Look at what she's saying. All right. Chu Tian seemed like he had made a decision. Since it is the young miss orders, Chu Tian will definitely follow it to the end. In the end, Chu Tian really listened to the young miss. In the future, he wouldn't go anywhere, staying in Miracle City for a while. He organized the materials in Miracle Commerce's inventory and gathered the materials from the moon god's ruins. These herbs were all very precious. If other alchemists from the mainland were to refine them, it would be a waste of God's gifts. If Chu Tian were to personally refine them, the effects would at least be doubled. Chu Tian's cultivation had already reached the Heaven Domain realm, and the others in Miracle Commerce couldn't keep up. The only ones with higher cultivation were Vivian, Nangong Yun, and Qinbingyu. Because of their high starting point or high talent, they had all reached the spirit transformation realm. The young miss, Meng Yingying, and the others, although they had high statuses, their innate talents were a bit lacking. Even if they spent a lot of resources, they couldn't compare to the others. so they all stopped at around the 5th true spirit layer. This was not a big problem. Miracle Commerce was rich and had plenty of resources. Could it be that they couldn't even nurture a few core members? If that was the case, then what was the use of establishing Miracle Commerce? Miracle City had enough materials and resources, as well as a master-level character like Chu Tian. During this period of time, other than refining pills, Chu Tian also made cultivation plans for everyone. With Chu Tian's immortal pills and cultivation plans, Vivian, Nangong Yun, Chen Bingyu, and the others should have hopes of reaching the Heaven Domain realm within half a year. Meng Yingying, Meng Qinggu, Feng Kai Dai, and the others would need around a year. The continent was temporarily calm. The various countries were working on it like a raging fire. Several transport towers were built as soon as possible. Miracle City finally opened a transport tower to the Empire area. Other aspects, such as logistics and communications, were all in the midst of preparation. Miracle City began to divide the outer space mines. Not only did they provide transport towers for the various powers, they also prepared a transport ship that could pass through the astral wind layer to reach the outer space mines. Outside the outer space mines, the underground world was also being developed. The underground world was different from outer space. The continent's underground world was not completely connected. Miracle City only controlled the underground world of the Forest of Chaos. Actually, in other parts of the continent, there were all kinds of underground spaces, but these underground worlds were all independent and some were not even connected to the surface. Miracle City used their superiority in technology and Chu Tian's memories to develop the various regions of the continent's underground world. Miracle City would provide technical support and the various empires would provide military support, working together to develop the area. The empire-level powers were not any less interested in the miracle helmets than others. This was because the market for the miracle spiritual helmets was too big. If each helmet could be sold for several dozen source stones, if they sold several tens of millions of helmets, wouldn't they be able to earn billions? They couldn't slack off in such a large market. With Miracle City's help, the intelligent factory was constructed. The various blueprints and technology were all in place and the materials needed were quickly transported over. These empire-level powers were worried about the production lines, afraid that their miracle helmets would lose to the others in terms of production. This matter was enough to make the rulers have no time to care about anything else. As for Miracle City's recent situation, naturally no one cared about it. Meng Qingwu seized this chance to gather large amounts of resources and source stones, starting to build military strength, especially the giant ship factory. Although Yingying had several warship production lines in her hands, these production lines were a bit too small. Each line could only produce one warship at a time and each warship needed over 3 weeks to get the materials out of the factory. In other words, a single production line could produce one warship in a month. With this kind of production, when would Miracle City be able to create a fleet? If Meng Qingwu wanted a true giant ship factory, production speed was the most basic requirement. She also needed to have the ability to make different kinds of warships and the factory itself needed the ability to upgrade itself, making even higher-level warships in the future. While the rulers weren't paying attention this time, Meng Qingwu gathered a sea of resources, preparing to build 4 giant ship factories at once. One was the Moon Shipbuilding Factory, one was the Outer Space Shipbuilding Factory, one was the Overseas Island Shipbuilding Factory, and one was the secret shipbuilding factory in the forest. The 4 shipbuilding factories were all located in different locations, all of which were quite secretive or inaccessible. The 4 factories were planned to be completed in half a year. They needed a total investment of 500 million source stones. Although Miracle City could be considered a large corporation on the continent, this kind of large project was a large burden to Miracle City who didn't have a deep background. Almost at the same time, Miracle City's Sky Castle and the Source Energy Weapon Defense Systems spread across the Alliance began to be built. The high-altitude laser cannons, the robot army, the mech suit army, all kinds of advanced weapons, and etc., each project was a bottomless pit. Meng Qingwu planned to invest 2 billion source stones first, but considering Miracle City's financial burden, She could only increase it every month, she couldn't invest it all at once. Chu Tian felt it was too little. Even 10 billion wouldn't be enough. 2 billion source stones couldn't complete this large project at all. At this time, Meng Qingwu was sitting in a white robe in a cultivation room. She had received Chu Tian's help and had broken through to the 6th true spirit layer 2 days ago, so she was currently stabilizing her realm. Meng Qingwu's speed was considered slow. Vivian was already in the peak 9th true spirit layer. Nangong Yun was a bit slower, but she wasn't far off. Even Meng Yingying had broken through to the 6th true spirit layer several days earlier than her elder sister. This was mainly because the young miss was too busy, so she didn't have much time to cultivate. Meng Qingwu slowly let out a sigh and she slowly opened her eyes. It's not bad. Chu Tian nodded in satisfaction. Your realm has already stabilized. Adapt to it for a bit before we continue to attack the next layer. Meng Qingwu stood up and said, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. Now that the company's large project had just begun, they couldn't waste even a second. Chu Tian quickly called out to the young miss, what is the young miss in such a rush for? We still have things to do. Meng Qingwu was stunned. What things? Yingying, Vivian, Nangong, Big Sister Bing, Feng Kaidai, they've recently invested in a hotel and today is the opening day. Chu Tian said to Meng Qingwu, should we go take a look? Meng Qingwu was a bit confused. What's so special about a hotel? Do we need to go for this kind of thing? Chu Tian laughed. Young miss is wrong, this hotel is not normal. What's not normal? This is the Space Hotel. Chu Tian continued to explain. They built a transport tower in the hotel and the hotel is connected to the most famous chefs of the Alliance through a logistics channel. In other words, in this hotel, guests can enjoy the freshest and most comprehensive specialties of the continent. Meng Qingwu found this a bit hard to believe. It's just a hotel, is there a need to invest this much? How come I didn't know that Yingying had done this kind of thing behind my back? This must have been your idea. Meng Yingying was the resource minister. Only Meng Yingying had the ability to use the eyes of the star and spatial crystals to build a transport tower and a space warehouse without Meng Qingwu knowing. But Meng Yingying wouldn't hide it from Meng Qingwu, so this matter must have been instigated by Chu Tian. Chu Tian rolled his eyes. They saw that Miracle City's finances were a bit tight recently, so they wanted to give you a pleasant surprise out of goodwill. Don't look down on the spending power of the continent's rich. With this hotel appearing out of nowhere, I think it will be very profitable. Other than that, I've decided to officially release the miracle helmets in the hotel. This way, we can earn a large amount of money for the city. Miracle City had stored hundreds of thousands of helmets, but they couldn't use them. Now they could use this chance to release them. Meng Qingwu couldn't refute this. Chu Tian always had his own reasons for everything he said, but the hotel had been built and what was done could not be undone. Could Meng Qingwu order people to tear down the hotel? She could only follow Chu Tian to see what the most luxurious hotel on the continent looked like. Chapter 621. The Miracle Alliance's Spatial Royal Hotel, also known as the Miracle Royal Palace. This hotel was built in the Kingdom Alliance's territory. It was originally a large kingdom that spent 2 generations of kings, building a luxurious royal palace for over 100 years. Because of the Eagle Burial Warring Kingdom's invasion, the kingdom had been destroyed for a period of time. Although they had successfully restored the kingdom had been plundered by the Eagle Burial Warring Kingdom, so they didn't have the money to continue repairing it. After Meng Yingying learned of this matter, she felt that it was a pity that the royal palace was abandoned like this. She discussed it with Vivian and the others and they took out 1 million source stones from their own pockets to buy the repaired royal palace. They also sent talented craftsmen from the Forest Alliance to quickly repair the royal palace. Now the royal palace had become the Miracle Space Hotel. This was the first hotel with the concept of space on the continent. The entire Miracle Royal Palace needed time to be repaired, but now that it was repaired, it was enough for them to open to the public. Today was the first day of business. All the famous people of the various countries were notified. Although they weren't forced to attend, the light from the transport tower never stopped. The kings and nobles of the various kingdoms, the forest city lords and chiefs, the Western Sea tribe elders, as well as famous merchants and experts, as well as the demon city lords of the underground world were all invited. The investment in the Miracle Royal Palace wasn't small. There was an independent transport tower here and an independent smart brain system. Around half of the attendants were robots, showing Miracle City's source energy technology. Chu Tun, elder sister, Meng Yingying and Vivian personally came in front of the two of them. Chu Tian looked around. It's very lively, ha ha. Of course it's lively. Nangong Yun's brows lit up as she said, who in our alliance wouldn't give us face? Not to mention, this is the continent's first spatial hotel, the highest level place. Who doesn't want to experience it? I think most of the people here are from the empires. These fellows are stupid and have a lot of money, so we can slaughter them all. There was indeed a large proportion of people from the empires. Chu Tian found many old friends he hadn't seen in a long time among the alliance members, like the Great Summer King Dongfang Gan, Shen Fengho, the Golden Arrow Marquis, and others. There was also Miracle Commerce's Chen Bingyu, Feng Kai Dai, Yun Yao, Yun Shao, Dongfang Haoren, Gu Qianxiu, Yun Tianhe, and other old members. There was also Shadow, Eitu, Mei Ji in Spirit, and other new members. Apart from these internal members, there were even more unfamiliar faces. Chu Tian had never seen them before, but since they appeared here, they were definitely high-ranking members of Miracle Commerce. Greetings, Guild Master. Vice President. No matter where these high-level members of Miracle City went, they were all famous people, but they were very clear on who gave them this status. Especially when they saw the legendary Chu Tian, they were all very respectful. No need to be polite, everyone can sit. The Miracle Space Grand Hotel was built on the foundation of a large royal palace, so the space was very large. There were several hunting grounds, gardens, artificial lakes, artificial mountains, and etc. There were over 100 palaces, over 50 large banquet halls, 500 small and medium-sized banquet halls, and over 800 living rooms. The Grand Hotel was named Miracle City, so how could it be the same as a normal hotel? The walls, floor tiles, walls, and pillars of the banquet hall were all made of holographic screens. They were also equipped with the best sound equipment. Whether it was a meeting, a ceremony, a press conference, or just a banquet, the banquet hall could simulate any scene according to the requirements. The service of the palaces here was very comprehensive, with each palace having a fixed spiritual connection device. This device was actually a more powerful spiritual helmet, providing more functions and entertainment than a helmet. There was not a single common delicacy here, being a feast made of the best materials. The Flower Fairy's fairy wine, the Elven Immortal tea, top-grade spirit beast and demonic beast meat, various precious medicines, and etc., made this the most luxurious place to spend money on the continent. Whether it was status or taste, this was the most suitable place among the countries of the continent. Therefore it wasn't hard to predict. In the future, all the emperors and powerful people would hold a banquet in the Miracle Royal Palace, which was the highest form of etiquette and the highest level of banquets. Meng Yingying and the others had found this business opportunity. There were many empires and kingdoms on the continent, and there were many families that had existed for tens of thousands of years. Even if these rich powers held a banquet here every year, it would still be a considerable amount of income. The transport array flashed. A peerless figure appeared. The surrounding people quickly bowed down when they saw this. Greetings to the Wind Moon Empress. Chu Tian was a bit surprised. Although there were quite a few people from the empires, even the Empress was disturbed. This was incredible. He walked over and cupped his hands. For the Wind Moon Empress to come out of her busy schedule, Chu Tian is honored. The Wind Moon Empress gave a tender laugh. The Miracle Royal Palace is a unique spatial hotel on the continent and is the most luxurious place on the continent. The Imperial City's transport tower has just been built, and although it's 1,000,000 miles away, it's still very close. How could this Empress not experience the beauty of it? Chu Tian waved his hand. I asked the Empress to take a seat. After the Wind Moon Empress came, the other emperors also came. When the transport array lit up again, the temperature in the hall dropped by quite a bit. When Chu Tian saw the person who came, his expression became a bit strange. Nether King? Chu Tian was a bit surprised. Your Majesty, the Nether King is also here to join in the fun? These words were a bit rude, but it wasn't an exaggeration. The Nether King was clearly an undead. They didn't need to eat at all. The Nether King coming to a hotel as an undead, how was this different from a eunuch visiting a brothel? The Nether King released a cold aura as he said to Chu Tian, I'm here to join in the fun, I'm mainly here to see you. Chu Tian was stunned by the Nether King's words. What? See me? The Nether King said, the Netherworld Sea has chosen 50 scholars over 8,000 years old. Perhaps they are unknown in the secular world, but their knowledge is not inferior to the continent's sages. Isn't Miracle City's Yun sect recruiting talents? These 50 undead sages, I think they will be of great help to Miracle City's research. Scholars over 8,000 years old? Even if they were stupid, they could still become peak sages after studying for several thousand years. This kind of person was rare even in the Netherworld Sea. The Nether King gave them all to Miracle City. This was truly a large move. But since the Nether King dared to give them to Miracle City, Chu Tian had no reason to refuse. The Nether King is supporting Miracle City's work this much. Chu Tian is filled with gratitude. With these undead sages in Miracle City, they will definitely be of great value. The Nether King was very satisfied with this reply. The banquet officially began. Chapter 622. The guests were already seated at this time. Friends and guests, welcome to the Miracle Royal Palace's grand opening. A very magnetic and beautiful voice came out and a beautiful blonde woman slowly appeared in the center of the hall. I am the host of this grand opening, Jean Luo. Everyone began to clap. The mermaid princess Jean Luo was very famous in the alliance. Jean Luo not only had the bloodline of the Deep Blue royal family, she was also the future successor of West Sea City and the Deep Blue Bank. Today, we have received the exclusive sponsorship of the Tree of Life Culture and Entertainment Company. The elves and the mermaids will perform for everyone. This is a rare chance, so let us enjoy it together. The light around them dimmed and the flat ground in the center suddenly began to rise, forming a stage. The surrounding environment began to change, creating a forest of colors. It gave people the illusion that they were not sitting in a hotel, but rather a beautiful and holy forest. This beautiful scene was taken from the Eternal Forest, allowing people who had never been to the Eternal Forest to feel the beauty of the Elven Forest. The entire hall was filled with the fragrance of all kinds of delicacies. The extremely luxurious banquet had already begun. A group of delicate and beautiful wood elves slowly walked onto the stage. They had long since rehearsed all kinds of performances and were holding all kinds of musical instruments in their hands as they began to display their talents. A cheerful, melodious, and elegant chorus filled the air. This scene made the guests from all over the continent feel like they were in the Elven Forest, listening to the music of the elves and enjoying the best wine and food on the continent, as well as eating with several emperors in the banquet hall. No matter what era it was, this was an unimaginable enjoyment for them. This was not only a material and spiritual enjoyment, but also an enjoyment of one's status and status. Only the noblest people on the continent could gather here, and this kind of satisfaction could not be measured by material things. Chu Tian brought the Meng Qingwu sisters and several emperors to sit at a long and gorgeous dining table. They were facing the stage, which was the best place to watch the performance. The elves' performance was splendid. This made people feel dazzled. The elves' performance in music and art made everyone feel happy, which led to waves of warm applause. Everyone was infected by this kind of noble enjoyment. They couldn't help but think that if they didn't have the Miracle Commerce Transport Tower, they probably wouldn't be able to enjoy such treatment in their entire lives. Chu Tian drank a mouthful of the Flower Fairy race's fairy wine. I remember that the life and culture commerce was made by the Tree of Life tribe's elven elders. It seems like it's doing quite well. Of course. Right now, the most popular records in the Alliance are basically produced by this Chamber of Commerce. In addition, the major movie theaters and music channels also account for half of the market. Meng Yingying was a bit reserved sitting with the emperors. She lowered her voice and said to Chu Tian, "Actually, Vivian and I invested in this Chamber of Commerce together. It's now the biggest giant in the entertainment industry. In the future, when we expand into other markets on the continent, there will be huge improvements." Chu Tian laughed. "You two are the major shareholders. No wonder things are going so smoothly." The Forest Alliance's business boom hadn't stopped, and it was becoming more and more intense now. A portion of Miracle Commerce's income came from investments. Vivian used her status as the Elven Princess to invest in all the important businesses of the elves. For example, the Eternal Forest's Matrix Chamber of Commerce and the Tree of Life Tribe's Culture and Culture Commerce. These companies with large growth potential all had investments from high-level members of Miracle Commerce. After the elves finished their performance, everyone was still a bit unsatisfied. But it didn't matter, the merpeople's performance began. The surrounding Eternal Forest suddenly changed, turning into the beautiful Crystal Bay in the blink of an eye. This was the most beautiful place in the Forest of Chaos and even the Western Sea. A group of beautiful and noble merpeople swam out of the sea, appearing on the stage. The merpeople and elves were very artistic races. The elves were very talented, being proficient in carving, music, and etc. The merpeople specialized in singing. Therefore, when the merpeople's singing spread out, it immediately captured everyone's hearts. Chu Tian closed his eyes to carefully feel it. Who is the main singer? This was a very young mermaid girl, but her voice was very infectious, giving people a wonderful experience as if they were in a dream. She is a talent dug out by West Sea City, the popular mermaid singer Yugu. Meng Yingying seemed very satisfied that her company could cultivate this kind of outstanding singer. Yuji's value is very high now. For a concert, it would cost around 40,000-50,000 source stones. A person's appearance fee was around 40,000-50,000 source stones. This was something many small families and companies couldn't earn in their entire lives. Chu Tian was a bit surprised, but then he said with a smile, "You've spent quite a bit of capital today?" "Today is a free performance sponsored by Yugu and the company, all right." Meng Yingying rolled her eyes at Chu Tian. "Yuji's appearance fee used to be around 40,000-50,000 source stones. I think it wouldn't be hard to double it after today." When the merpeople finished singing. Good. The Wind Moon Empress took the initiative to clap. "I really like this mermaid singing. After this banquet, we have to invite her to perform in the palace." The Heaven-Burning Emperor gave a carefree laugh. This emperor likes the elves' performances. The Heaven-Burning Empire's 9,000-year celebration is about to begin, so I'm prepared to invite them to perform. City Lord Chu Tian, what do you think? Chu Tian nodded. "This is the honor of our artists." That little girl Yingying had really hit the mark. There were quite a few important people here. There were several emperors like this. Although Miracle City's earning power was slowly catching up to the Empire's standards, how many years was Miracle City's history? The empires had thousands of years of history, so even if they saved 200 million source stones each year, Miracle City couldn't even imagine their background. These rich fellows who loved face and money, how could they be stingy with source stones? If Yugu was chosen by some great emperor and invited to perform, she would receive several times the appearance fee. Otherwise, how could she display the capability and strength of the empire? These people were invited by the great emperor to perform, and after she returned, her value would rise again. Not only would the sales of her albums and artworks increase, but other kingdoms and great families would also pay a lot of money to invite her to perform. It was important to show one's face, especially on such an occasion. This was the main purpose of this performance planning. That was the end of today's performance. Everyone felt very satisfied. The host Jean Luo came forward with a microphone. "Now we will begin the second segment, which is also an important segment that everyone is paying attention to. Miracle Commerce's first batch of spiritual helmets has been prepared, and since the various countries of the continent are here today, Miracle Commerce will use this as a miracle to sell it to the entire continent." The miracle helmet was officially announced. Everyone was overjoyed. Chapter 623. This was truly exciting news. Ever since the Miracle Peak appeared, the entire world was looking forward to the miracle helmets appearing on the market. However, although the various helmets had already started mass production, it would still take some time for it to reach a certain scale. They would let everyone have a taste of it this time. The several thousand guests were all top characters of various countries. Not only did they have money and power, they also had quite a bit of influence. Now that they were selling it, it would be much easier to sell it on the continent in the future. The Miracle Royal Palace's servers began to move out and Miracle City's commemorative helmets were placed in everyone's hands. Everyone coming to support the Miracle Royal Palace, Miracle City is very honored. Although there is a limited number of spiritual helmets, we will take out a portion and give it to everyone as a souvenir. The item in everyone's hands is the official Miracle Spiritual Helmet. Our miracle helmets have all kinds of functions. Other than allowing you to enter the beautiful miracle continent filled with fantasies, you can also use it for shopping, finance, communication, and etc., but it is not just limited to that. Jean Luo introduced the helmet's functions and prospects. As everyone knows, the Miracle Commerce Research Institute's UNSECT is the most innovative organization on the continent. A large portion of Miracle Commerce's revenue is invested in research. The UNSECT Research Institute is spread all over the continent, with a total of 180,000 researchers. If you add in the logistics department, it is hard to imagine how many people there are on the continent. Whether it is in scale or investment, it is hard to find an opponent on the continent. Everyone nodded when they heard this. It was fine if it was in other areas. They couldn't help but be convinced by this research. Miracle Commerce's research investments were over 100 million source stones, and from the current situation, it would increase by over 50% every month. Not to mention the salaries of over 100,000 researchers, it was not something a normal power could afford. Not to mention the fact that there were many materials used. What was the difference between this kind of large and powerful research institute and a monster that ate money? There was a natural risk in investing in research because a product had to go from research to production. It would take a long time to become a product. If any part of this process went wrong, the entire investment would go down the drain. Miracle Commerce had many businesses and a large amount of revenue, but the net profit was not high. The main reason for this was because they invested too much in research. However, the existence of the UNSECT was very important to Miracle Commerce and it was indispensable to Miracle Commerce. Under the command of the highest person in charge of the UNSECT, Meng Qingwu, this large structure operated with the highest efficiency. There were over 100 departments and over 1,000 large and small projects, all of which had been organized by Meng Qingwu. There were results every day and each one could be sold for 10 or even 100 times in the future. The UNSECT was currently investing a lot. The rewards would be even greater in the future. Spiritual products have already become one of the most important products of Miracle Commerce. Jean Luo continued to say, under the orders of our Vice Chairman and Vice City Lord Meng Qingwu, the Spiritual Network Department has been established and I am in charge of the Spiritual Network Department. Now the department has recruited 5,000 spiritual domain experts from all over the continent, preparing to come to Miracle City's spiritual center to provide us with strong support and protection. In the future, there will be even more functions being developed. Everyone at the scene applauded. The mental domain was a very large domain. The spiritual network was only one of the important areas. Just building a spiritual network was this large. It could be seen how much hope and expectation Miracle Commerce had for the miracle helmets. With this many spiritual engineers working hard to build it, the spiritual helmets would have more and more functions and uses in the future. Some people couldn't help asking questions. Then when will the helmets be sold? That's right. What is the selling price? Jean Luo answered everyone's questions. There are helmet manufacturing centers in the various regions of the continent, and according to the progress of different regions, the time and quantity of the helmets will be different. Everyone can pay attention to the situation in your respective regions. But in order to warm up the miracle helmets, Miracle Commerce will first sell 400 to 500,000 helmets after the conference ends. They will be auctioned off to the Miracle Shopping Center. If everyone wants to try it, you can use the helmet in your hand or your cell phone to check it out. You can also go to our Miracle Shopping Center stores in various regions. Everyone revealed looks of joy, but they were also very depressed. Only 400 to 500,000 helmets? There were several 100 billion people on the continent. This was a bit too little. Now that they were auctioned off to the Miracle Shopping Center, the price would be very terrifying. There was no lack of rich people in this world. Although they could buy helmets in various regions in a few days, they didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money just to try it out a few days earlier. There were people testing the helmets and someone quickly found a problem. Why can't we enter the Miracle Continent? When will this place be opened? This is the third matter Miracle Commerce wants to announce. Jean Luo already guessed that someone would ask this. In 15 days, our respected Alliance Chairman, Miracle City Lord, Miracle Commerce's Chairman, Sir Chu Tian, and one of Miracle Commerce's co-founders, Sir Meng Yingying, will hold their wedding at the beautiful Crystal Bay on the west coast. The Miracle Continent will be officially opened on this day, so let us all congratulate City Lord Chu Tian. It would open in 15 days? Everyone revealed looks of pleasant surprise. As for the matter of Chu Tian and Meng Yingying holding their wedding on the west coast, everyone was paying close attention to it. Of course, people weren't paying attention to the wedding itself, rather they were using the wedding as a chance to curry favor with Chu Tian. Now that Miracle Commerce's influence on the continent was growing, it wasn't wrong to have a good relationship with Miracle Commerce. Jean Luo said everything she needed to announce. Everyone continued to eat and drink. This luxurious banquet lasted for several hours before it gradually came to an end. The Wind Moon Empress and the other large characters wanted to stay in the Miracle Royal Palace for a few days, which Miracle Commerce couldn't ask for. The prices here were terrifyingly high, so these large characters would earn large amounts of source stones just by staying for a few days. Meng Yingying gave the day's business to Chu Tian. Today's average consumption is 8,000 source stones and there are over 6,000 people participating. The total revenue is over 50 million source stones and after deducting the cost, we have earned over 30 million source stones. Earning 30 million in a day? Meng Qingwu was also shocked when she heard this number. Average consumption of 8,000 source stones? The prices here were a bit too high. What concept was 8,000 source stones? Anyway, for some small and medium-sized families in small countries, even if they sold all their assets, it wouldn't be enough for these people to come to the Miracle Royal Palace for a meal. This also showed just how powerful these fellows' spending power was. Miracle City had truly made a large profit by establishing this hotel. This was just the beginning. Vivian teleported over. Big brother Chu Tian, come quickly. The Miracle Shopping Center is preparing to start selling the Miracle helmets. This is the first time the Miracle helmets are being sold in large quantities. We can't miss this good chance. Alright, Yingying, let's go take a look. Chu Tian led Yingying to the Smart Brain Center of the castle. The Miracle Shopping Center's super smart brain was placed here. Meng Qingwu, Jean Luo, and the other important members had all been waiting here for a long time. Chu Tian asked, "How are our sales?" "We can't auction off the 400,000 helmets one by one." "Of course not, we will auction off the helmets one by one." The 400,000 helmets will be sold at the Miracle Shopping Center for around 3 days. The starting price of the helmets will be in source stones and buyers from all over the continent can bid during this time. If the bid is in the top 400,000, the corresponding source stones on their accounts will be locked. When they are pushed out of the rankings by other bidders, the locked source stones will be unlocked. They can choose to give up or they can choose to continue bidding. So it was like this. During Miracle City's auction period, every Miracle Shopping Center store, cell phones, and other devices could be auctioned off. People from all over the continent could bid through the Miracle Shopping Center, and when the auction ended, the top 400,000 people would be able to buy the helmets. This was an efficient and open method. Each person could only buy one helmet at a time. This would prevent some dealers with ulterior motives from buying the helmets on a large scale and selling them at a high price. Wouldn't 3 days be too short? Nangong Yun was a bit uncertain. What if there aren't that many people bidding? Impossible. The Miracle Royal Palace has several thousand large characters. They won't let go of this chance. They will definitely pull in the people from their respective powers. Next, we will spread the news through various channels, so it won't take a day for the news to spread. There is already a lot of attention. What were they waiting for? Let's directly begin. Meng Qingwu asked the smart brain, have all the data and connections been prepared? The Miracle Shopping Center's super smart brain replied, reporting to the Vice City Lord, everything has been prepared. Meng Qingwu said with a nod, then let's begin. Chapter 624. The Miracle Shopping Center was already the largest chain store on the continent, and it was also an era-defining online shopping method, making the Miracle Shopping Center welcomed by the masses as it expanded on the continent. Now basically in any city that had a communication signal, people could use the Miracle Shopping Center to shop. They could use their cell phones or radios to connect to the Miracle Shopping Center platform, obtaining the latest information on the Miracle Shopping Center. Of course, the amount of information a cell phone could receive was limited. If they didn't feel satisfied or had a more detailed request, they could go to the Miracle Shopping Center's physical stores. The Miracle Shopping Center's physical stores already covered over 2,000 cities. These places had the normal function of selling goods, so they could be considered shopping malls with perfect experience, good service, and a full range of goods. At the same time, they also had the Miracle Shopping Center's platform, allowing people to buy everything on the continent without leaving their homes. If they liked something, they just needed to pay and Miracle Commerce would send it to the city they wanted. However, although the Miracle Shopping Center already covered over 5 billion people, because people's new shopping habits were still slowly being developed, it didn't even reach 2% of the 5 billion people. But even so, the monthly transaction volume had exceeded 1 or 2 billion, and it was still increasing month by month. Miracle Commerce encouraged more goods to enter the platform, so naturally they had to give profits to the merchants. But even after deducting the profits and other costs, the Miracle Shopping Center could still make several hundred million in profit. Now it was the main source of income for Miracle Commerce and Miracle City, as well as the one with the most potential. Meng Qingwu invested half of the Miracle Shopping Center's profits back into the Miracle Shopping Center's development. This money was used to increase the Miracle Shopping Center staff, increase the number of smart brains in the Miracle Shopping Center, increase the technology, and etc. The Miracle Shopping Center was like a snowball that kept getting bigger and bigger. The expansion of the Miracle Shopping Center did not just increase Miracle Commerce's business potential, it also greatly increased Miracle Commerce's economic and financial development. Source stones were the common currency of the continent. But the value of source stones was too high, so it wasn't suitable for daily shopping. Each country had their own currency, and the Miracle Shopping Center would become a unified trading platform, controlling the exchange rate of each country's currency. In the future, the citizens of each country would open their own bank accounts, and even if they brought it to other countries to spend, they wouldn't need to exchange it for source stones. Miracle Commerce could use the Miracle Shopping Center and banks to release a new currency in the future, using this currency to rule over most small and medium countries. Now the citizens of the continent were stirred, and the doorsteps of each Miracle Shopping Center were almost broken. He's here. He's here. The Miracle Helmet has been released. A wave of cheers came from the Miracle Shopping Center of a small country's main city. Miracle City put the 450,000 spiritual helmets on the shelves at a base price of 20 source stones and began to auction them. 20 primary stones? This price is too expensive. When the normal people saw the base price of the Miracle Helmet, they all shook their heads and sighed. This price was nothing to some big empires, but in a small country, unless one was a big noble, it was impossible to have the financial resources to buy a helmet. It would be difficult for an ordinary person to earn such a sum in their lifetime. According to the previous Southern Xia currency exchange rate, 20 source stones was equivalent to 20 million Southern Xia gold coins. This was enough to buy a mansion in the imperial city of Southern Xia and keep 8-10 concubines. What do you know? The rarer something is, the greater its value. The entire continent is fighting over the miracle helmet. Is the price high? I think you've underestimated him. This cost was not even worth mentioning in large countries or empires. To experience the spiritual helmet faster, what did a bit more source stones count for? The bidding has begun. Although they couldn't buy it, it didn't stop everyone from watching. The 400,000 miracle helmets had just been released, and from the special display screen, there were over 100,000 bids. Moreover, this number was still growing at a terrifying rate, quickly reaching 200,000, 300,000, 500,000. Everyone was dumbfounded. Could it be that there were this many people on the continent waiting for the miracle helmet to appear? Just how popular and crazy was this miracle helmet? Quickly look at first place. When everyone saw the first price, the air seemed to stop moving and the entire shopping center seemed to freeze. There was only the sound of people swallowing their saliva. 20,000. 20,000 source stones. This buyer had directly increased the base price by 1,000 times. This was clearly too lazy to join in the bidding, directly throwing several tens of thousands of source stones and waiting for the helmet to arrive. What was called a rich person? This was called a rich person. This city's monthly tax revenue didn't even reach 20,000 source stones. The mysterious buyer didn't even take a look before throwing out 20,000 source stones. This was definitely not an isolated case. Because after a few minutes, several more high bids appeared. 30,000, 20,000, 40,000, 50,000. These bidders casually raised the price by several thousand times. These fellows definitely didn't even look at the bidding list, directly throwing in several tens of thousands of source stones with their eyes closed. Since they wanted the helmet, they didn't care about 10,000 or 20,000. People cheered again and again. The price of the helmet became higher and higher. There was a noise coming from the crowd at this time. Move, move. Everyone was a bit stunned because this person was none other than the city's young city lord. They saw the young city lord holding an elven bank card as he walked in with an anxious expression. Was the young city lord prepared to buy the helmet? The crowd parted to form a path. The young city lord first looked at the bidding list and found that the lowest price was above 36 source stones. The rules set by Miracle Commerce was that everyone could bid, and the higher the bid, the higher the ranking. In 3 days, the highest 40 spots would be taken. If there was a situation where the bids were the same, the one who bid first would be ranked first, and the helmet would be given out according to the ranking. Therefore, bidding early had the advantage of the morning paper, and bidding late had the advantage of the evening paper. The competition is very big. The young city lord looked at the constantly refreshing bidding list. There were at least several million people on the continent competing for the miracle spiritual helmet, and this number was still increasing. The young city lord hesitated. At this time, several luxurious carriages stopped in the city and several rich-looking people joined in. Young city lord, why aren't you bidding yet? A citizen couldn't help saying, if you don't bid now, it'll be too late. The young city lord's forehead was covered in sweat as he stared at the screen. Although the bids weren't too high right now, with this competitive trend, it would quickly break 3 digits. 125 source stones. The young city lord thought of this and immediately gave out this number. The surrounding people all cried out in shock. It was just buying a helmet. Was there a need to give out such a high price? Don't think that the price isn't good right now. I think it will increase by a large amount before long. The young city lord said in a reasonable voice, instead of fighting with the low price, it's better to take the high ground first. This way, even if someone else bids the same price as me because I bid first, I can bid first. The price of the helmet kept increasing. The entire bidding process lasted for 3 days. There were many things that happened in these 3 days that were enough to make the news. For example, there were some people from large countries, especially rich people from empires. Because they didn't have the Miracle Shopping Center's channels, they specially went to a small country to upgrade their bank cards. For example, there was a fellow from the continent who used a giant dragon bank card and directly transferred 1 million source stones, instantly shocking the entire continent. Later it was said that this person came from the dragon territory and wanted to use this chance to advertise their giant dragon bank. In short, the bidding for the miracle helmets was crazy for 3 days. Letting the people of the continent know how rich the rich were and letting the people of the continent see just how rich the rich were. A spiritual helmet with a base price of 20 source stones actually spent 1 million source stones to take first place. No matter what their goal was, this 1 million source stones would go into Miracle Commerce's pockets. Just to show off, they actually did this kind of thing. It really was incredible. Of course, this was a minority in the end. Most people were more rational. When the bidding ended, the lowest price was 225 source stones, which was around 10 times the price. This was a relatively reasonable price range. Ha ha ha. I bought it. The young city lord found that he was really lucky, buying it at the lowest price. Because he bid earlier, according to the Miracle Shopping Center's rules, although there were tens of thousands of people who bid the same price as him, they were all ranked below the young city lord, so most of them didn't have a bounty. It's a profit. It's a profit. The young city lord was wild with joy. There were many areas on the continent, especially the empires, because they didn't have transport arrays or shopping centers, they couldn't buy the miracle helmets even if they had money. If the young city lord sold the helmet now, it wouldn't be hard for him to earn 10 times the price. He could just buy it the next time the helmet went on sale. No matter what, the young city lord was going to become famous in this city. But many people were concerned about a question. How much did Miracle Commerce earn in this auction? Chapter 625. All of Miracle Commerce was frantically busy. This auction ranking method only took a short 3 days. Not only did it bring a large return, it also became a hot topic, allowing the entire continent to discuss this matter. If this was a marketing plan for the miracle helmets, the planner would definitely give it full marks. The most important thing was that this was not just marketing, it was also a real profit. On the day that Miracle Commerce's auction ended, all the Miracle Commerce members gathered in the conference room. Each person was quietly waiting and each person had a look of anticipation on their faces. The moment the auction ended, the shopping center's super smart brain displayed a series of data on the screen. In just a short 3 days, there were a total of 12,130,000 people bidding for the helmet. There were a total of 49,600,000 bids, with the highest price being 1 million source stones, over 100,000 source stones, and the lowest price being 225 source stones. Finally, a large number appeared on the screen. This data showed the large disparity in wealth on the continent. The rich people could throw away millions as easily as a single copper coin, while the poor people kept trying their luck. The total sales were 408,310,000 source stones. In total, each helmet was sold for around 930 source stones. When this data came out, everyone applauded. Not only did this bring Miracle Commerce a large amount of income, it also showed the Miracle Spiritual Helmet's strong charm and future prospects. 400 million. Is there a mistake? After the Miracle Helmet's research and development department learned of the sales, they were all stunned by this data because they knew that the Miracle Helmet's production cost was very low. 400,000 Miracle Spiritual Helmets. The materials didn't exceed 2 million. 2 million worth of materials turned into a product worth 400 million. Just the profit alone couldn't be described. This was simply turning stone into gold. Not to mention that Miracle Commerce had gathered such a large amount of income, instantly alleviating their tight financial situation. Everyone has done very beautifully this time. Chu Tian stood up and applauded. Not only have we opened the most luxurious restaurant on the continent, we have also used this chance to hype up the helmets, bringing a large amount of income to Miracle City. I've decided to take out 1/10 of this profit as a reward for everyone. 1/10 was 40 million source stones. This was a very generous reward. From the frontline workers like Meng Yingying and Jean Luo to the helmet's researchers and shop employees, all of them were given a huge reward. To these employees, this was equivalent to 5 to 8 years' worth of salary. Meng Qingwu had some objections to Chu Tian giving out large bonuses. After all, Miracle City still needed large amounts of funds. This bonus was a bit too much, but she knew what kind of person Chu Tian was. Since this money was a pleasant surprise, it didn't matter if he gave out a bit more. We need to publicize the brilliant results that we have achieved. Earning 400 million in 3 days is a very good topic to hype up. We can use it to further increase the influence of the helmet. At the same time, we can give other partners confidence and show them the potential of the helmet. Meng Qingwu smiled at this point. Seeing that the sales of the helmets are so good, I'm afraid the empires are all green with envy. Even if they don't eat or drink, they will still make the helmets. The more popular the helmets were, the more significant this was to Miracle City. Reporting to Sir City Lord. At this time, the super smart brain in charge of managing Miracle City, Zero, said, Sir City Lord, a group of undead have come from the Netherworld Sea's transport tower. They say they are scholars sent by the Netherworld Sea and have been detained by the relevant troops in the transport tower. I asked the City Lord to at most. Scholars? Chu Tian patted his forehead. He remembered. Chu Tian had received a gift from the Nether King not long ago. He had given Chu Tian 50 undead sages. Now that this group of undead had arrived, Chu Tian immediately went to greet this group of envoys. This group of undead could be considered the same. Some were spirits, some were liches, some were skeletons, and some were liches. In short, they were all surrounded by a strong death aura, making it hard for living people to approach them. Chu Tian quickly came forward. You must be the sages from the Netherworld Sea. The titles of scholars on the continent were Scholar, Great Scholar, Country Scholar, Great Country Scholar, Sage, and Great Sage. Everyone thought that the Netherworld Sea was a king's land surrounded by death all year round, but very few people knew that the Netherworld Sea was the place with the deepest research on the continent. This was because the undead had an unlimited lifespan. This was because the undead didn't have any other pleasures. This was because the undead couldn't increase their cultivation through eating pills or cultivation methods. Therefore, most of the highly intelligent undead would choose the path of research. Actually, according to Chu Tian's knowledge, the reason humans could rise on the continent was because they had obtained large amounts of knowledge from the undead. This knowledge was researched by the undead for tens of thousands of years, and humans used this knowledge as a foundation to create source energy technology. The intelligence of the undead couldn't be underestimated. The undead sages were old undead that had existed for a very long time. Chu Tian knew that although the undead were immortal from a biological point of view, the undead couldn't truly exist forever. Just like the city's smart brain, Zero, who was once a lich, after a long time, the undead's consciousness would gradually disappear. This was a hard-to-resist mental aging. For these fellows to exist for this long, they most likely had some special skills. One of the necromancers came over and said, "The Nether King has allowed us to come to Miracle City to study. In the next 5 years, we will be managed by the City Lord. Of course, we will receive the treatment we deserve. All the research materials and consumption will be provided by Miracle City." Was 5 years even considered time to the undead? But to Chu Tian, 5 years was too long. No matter what goal the Nether King had in sending these 50 sage-level scholars to Miracle City, in these 5 years, it was enough for Chu Tian to do a lot of things. These are all things that should be done. What domains are you proficient in? Chu Tian understood how precious these undead sages were. Some of them were proficient in the spatial domain, some were proficient in the spiritual domain, and some were proficient in the soul domain. There were even some that studied time. There were some undead sages that were famous people when they were alive, but they had undead rituals to pursue eternal life. Good, very good. Miracle City needs people and you've come at the right time. I won't mistreat you. With these sage-level super scholars joining, Miracle Commerce's research and development abilities would increase greatly. The thoughts and ideas that appeared in Chu Tian's mind became more and more crazy because of this. Chapter 626. The Yunsek's research facility was large, but they lacked peak experts. This was the main difference between Miracle City and the empires. This time the Nether King had sent 50 undead sages from the Netherworld Sea and they were in different areas. This was undoubtedly a timely help to Miracle City. Chu Tian decided to properly display their value. He would let Miracle Commerce's technology reach another level in a short period of time. What was the Nether King's goal? It didn't matter. He would just treat these sages as studying abroad. Chu Tian wasn't afraid of his technology being stolen because 5 years was enough for Miracle Commerce to cover the entire continent. At that time, even if a portion was stolen, it wouldn't be of much use. Not to mention that Chu Tian's technology was constantly being updated, so the parts that could be stolen would always be outdated. Chu Tian had just settled these undead sages when Meng Qingwu quickly contacted him. There is a special matter. Quickly come back and we'll talk. Chu Tian returned to the Miracle Castle and saw several people dressed in the clothes of various countries. Meng Qingwu immediately introduced them to Chu Tian. A few of the Empire's and Empire-level forces envoys, Fengyu, Fentian, Berserk Beast, Netherworld Ocean, etc. They must have been ordered by their respective bosses to come and discuss some important matters. So it's the envoys of the various countries? Sorry for the disrespect. Chu Tian cupped his hands and directly asked, "What matter do you have to teach this one? How could we dare teach Sir Miracle City's city lord?" A female envoy from the Wind Moon Empire respectfully said, "We are here on the Emperor's orders to negotiate a cooperation." At this time, the Burning Heaven Empire's people couldn't help saying, "City Lord Chu Tian, our Burning Heaven Empire came first. Even if you want to cooperate, you should cooperate with us first." The Dragon Territory's people didn't like it. This business isn't like normal shopping. How can it be first come first served? Of course we'll choose whoever has the best conditions. What was this situation? Chu Tian looked at Meng Qingwu beside him with a strange gaze. Meng Qingwu gave a soft cough and explained for the envoys, because the miracle helmets are selling so well in the Miracle Shopping Center, it is very regretful that the citizens of the empires didn't manage to buy one. However, it's not that the people in the Empire District don't have the capital and interest. It's just that the speed at which miracle commerce spreads is very limited. Most of the Empire District hasn't been able to cover it yet. Moreover, the bidding period is too short, so they don't have the time and channels to participate. Chu Tian could guess what was going on. It was the emperors who were jealous of Miracle City's profits, so they wanted to come in and earn some more. So, the Burning Heaven Emperor has decided to take out the first batch of 500,000 helmets and use Miracle Commerce's shopping mall to auction them across the continent. We will also set up auction locations in the various states of the Empire, allowing the people of the Empire to participate. We can guarantee a good price and let the people of the Empire experience the wonders of the Miracle Helmet. Chu Tian rolled his eyes. What kind of reason was this? If they were really thinking for the citizens of the Empire, why would they need to sell it at a high price? They could just directly sell it. They wanted to earn money from their own citizens, but they had to use such a good reason. This kind of thing, Chu Tian could only snort in disdain. But then again, you've made 500,000 helmets this quickly? Chu Tian was very suspicious of this number. I remember that the large helmet factory in the Burning Heaven Empire had just been built. Could it be that you can make helmets out of thin air? The Heaven Burning Empire envoy said in a serious tone. The helmets haven't been made yet, but we can sell them first. We'll have a 3-5 day auction and then wait another 3-5 days. Won't we have finished making the helmets? Chu Tian simply couldn't accept it. These fellows didn't even make it and they were already selling it. How could there be a business like this in this world? They simply couldn't wait to make a profit, as if they were afraid someone else would take it first. Chu Tian looked at the others. Although he didn't ask, from their expressions, it seemed like they were all thinking the same thing. It really made him blush with shame. Chu Tian didn't even have time to express his opinion before the envoys began to argue about who they should cooperate with. The Wind Moon Empire envoy said, Miracle City will first cooperate with the Wind Moon Empire and will give 10% of the profits to Miracle City. 10%? The Heaven Burning Empire's envoy gave a cold laugh before loudly announcing, Our Heaven Burning Empire will give 20%. So fierce? Directly double it. The Dragon Territory envoy was even more arrogant. Dragon Territory is willing to give 30%. Chu Tian and Meng Qingwu watched these envoys fight to the side. A quarter of the profits would be given to Miracle Commerce. Miracle Commerce could really earn money lying down. Chu Tian even suspected that if they continued to argue, they would raise the chips to 50%. These powers were in a long-term competition with each other. Therefore, they would rather earn less or not earn at all than let the other side earn. The Dark Knight Forest envoy saw that arguing like this wasn't a solution, so his eyes fell onto Chu Tian and he said, "City Lord Chu Tian, what do you think?" The envoys stopped at the same time and looked at Chu Tian. "Everyone, please calm down." Chu Tian spoke to appease everyone. "Think about it. If you have to choose one, wouldn't you be offending everyone else? Miracle City will not do this kind of offending thing. You are all deeply rooted overlords of the continent, and Miracle City is a rising star that has only appeared in recent years. How could we dare offend you?" The envoys all looked at each other in blank dismay. This kind of choice made Miracle City feel very awkward. Chu Tian said at this time, "I have a method that everyone will be happy with. It just depends on whether you agree or not." "What method?" The Wind Moon Empire envoy quickly asked. "Tell me." Chu Tian slowly replied, "Why do you need to fight over it? Our era is developing very quickly, so don't think about eating alone. Sharing and cooperating is the way to prosperity in the future, so we can all become rich together." The envoys didn't understand. Chu Tian explained, "You can each take out 500,000 helmets and put them all into the Miracle Shopping Center. The final source stones will be split fairly. It will be a large profit. Isn't it a happy ending?" This was indeed a method. But there were people who didn't agree. The Wind Moon Empire envoy said, "How can this be? Our Wind Moon Empire is rich and strong. Can your Heaven Burning Empire compare? If we split it evenly, wouldn't we suffer a large loss?" "Hey, I don't even want to split it with you. The Heaven Burning Empire has a large population and wide territory. Can you compare? Speaking of wealth, the Dragon Territory is the richest. Speaking of people, the Wild Beast Empire has the most people." These envoys were arguing and no one wanted to give in at all. This gave Chu Tian a headache. Meng Qingwu couldn't help standing up and saying, "Everyone listen to me." Meng Qingwu was a person with a lot of prestige. The envoys were clear in their hearts that the one in charge of Miracle City was this woman, so it was best to restrain themselves in front of this woman. After all, they would have to deal with her often in the future. Actually, this problem isn't hard to solve. Miracle Commerce's smart brain system can analyze the buying situation and the total price. We can give a larger share to the places with higher sales and a smaller share to the places with lower sales. This way, we can divide the profits fairly. Naturally, this was a method. But the envoys were not satisfied. Meng Qingwu threw out another condition. Miracle Commerce can only accept a win-win cooperation. As for Miracle City's share, we only want 20%. If the envoys can go back and convince His Majesty, we can immediately begin our cooperation. Otherwise, it will be hard, so I ask you to weigh the pros and cons. Was there a choice? Who didn't like to earn more source stones? The empires didn't have a channel like the Miracle Shopping Center, so even if they produced the helmets, they wouldn't be able to sell them. The production of the helmets hadn't reached a large scale yet, so how much could they earn by selling the helmets at the same price? This bit of source stones was nothing in the eyes of the empires. The envoys brought back Meng Qingwu's words. On the same day, the rulers held a meeting with Meng Qingwu using the spiritual helmets. They all agreed to Meng Qingwu's proposal, mainly discussing the details. For example, how many helmets each empire would reserve to prevent the first batch of helmets being bought by other empires. For example, how to divide the profits of the helmets so they wouldn't have to fight over the profits after they were sold. After Meng Qingwu mediated, finally she came up with a proposal that everyone was satisfied with. This matter was decided like this. The Wind Moon Empire, the Heaven Burning Empire, the Wild Beast Empire, the Dark Knight Forest, the Dragon Territory, and the Netherworld Sea, these 6 main powers would each provide 500,000 helmets, for a total of 3 million helmets. They would all be placed in the Miracle Shopping Center for auction. The range of the bidding this time was even wider. Each empire had a place to bid in their country's states and affiliated imperial cities. This meant that the spending power of the country and the outside world would be mobilized and the bidding time would be longer, reaching a full 7 days, allowing the rich people from all walks of life to bid. For the miracle helmets to become a popular product on the continent, it would take at least another year or two. Right now, the miracle helmets were just a luxury item for the rich. There were no rich people on the continent that were worth hundreds of millions of source stones. These fellows didn't lack money at all. As long as they could experience the spiritual helmets, what did it matter if they spent 50,000 or more source stones? In order to have more reason to bid, miracle commerce began to wildly advertise to the outside. The Miracle City Lord's wedding was coming, and this was the last batch of miracle helmets before the miracle continent opened. If they missed this chance, they would have to wait at least another month or two. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.